The answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sent his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great, great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative, because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us, because, as you know, that's right there, that's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning and welcome to A Morning Glory. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 6. The sun is up. It's a beautiful sunrise this morning, by the way. You know I always like to talk about it, but I've just looked out the window shortly before I started the show, and I just tweeted out a picture of the great big sort of red ball rising behind Canary Wharf. It's really quite extraordinary, quite staggering. I'll try and put it out on Facebook and Instagram as well so you can all see it. But we've got something very serious to discuss this morning, and I'm not joking when I say this, because I think this should be taken as seriously as I mean it. And I mean no disrespect to the great Chancellor of the Exchequer and the Office of State that she holds, and I mean this very sincerely, because I'm quite frankly quite worried about Rachel Reeves. Rachel Reeves, a woman who up until now has really not had a particularly important job. She didn't have a very important job at the Bank of England. She ended up working in the complaints department of the Bank of Scotland, where she took calls from people saying, you know, I'm upset about my mortgage rate, what are you going to do about it? She suddenly finds herself catapulted into the front and centre of, you know, the world and its periscopes, shining on her, lights shining on her. She's front and centre. Walks into the House of Commons yesterday, has to stand up and try and make an account of herself. She has to walk from Downing Street into a car. She has to go and do her job in front of millions and millions of people. Scrutiny coming from right, left and centre, not only from the people in the newspaper business, but from journalists like me, from broadcasters like me, from the world's economic kind of markets. She's being judged every single step of the way. And the front page of the Daily Mail today says she's deluded. I think they've got a point. I think she's actually seriously deluded to the point where she might be doing herself harm. She's certainly doing us harm, and she's certainly doing the nation harm. And I think that definitely fits the definition, if you like, of somebody who needs to be taken off into a dark room and asked to lie down and possibly be examined by a psychiatrist. Because I think the trouble is she's now telling us all the time that everything's going so well that she's carrying on with her efforts to build the economy up, to put money back into the pockets of working people, to bring Britain back to the place where it should be. Let's have a listen to what she said about how well it's going on the growth front.
The OBR have today revised down our growth forecast for 2025 from 2% in the autumn to 1% today. I am satisfied with these numbers.
She's not satisfied with it. Well, I'll tell you what, neither is anybody else. And to be honest, you know, the idea that she's talking as if everything's going fine, I think I'm worried about her. Honestly, I mean, I'm not being funny here. I want you to join me with the feeling that we all should have, that I think she's doing harm to herself and could do more harm to the economy if she's left to rattle around in number 11 Downing Street. I mean, the front page of Daily Express says, reckless Rachel tanks economy by killing growth. I mean, that says it all, really. Even the Daily Mirror and the Guardian have deserted her. The Daily Mirror says, balancing the books on the backs of the poor. That's a quote from the Joseph Rowntree Foundation. The Guardian goes with the same one. Reeves accused of balancing books at the expense of the poor. Tom Slater's here with us. Tom, very good morning to you.
Morning.
I hope you're going to join me in this sort of cri de coeur, I'm going to call it, to say that Rachel maybe should take a step back from the front line of politics and actually just have some time off, because she clearly doesn't know what she's doing and she thinks she's doing a great job. And I think, normally speaking, if that was anybody else walking into a doctor's office telling them how well they were doing at work when they were clearly absolutely tanking it and about to be sacked, the doctor would say, maybe you should be sectioned.
I mean, delusional is absolutely the word for it, isn't it? And I think you could definitely say that if we're talking politically and economically speaking, she is certainly a danger to herself and others at this point. So we've got to take that seriously.
I think we have to take it very seriously. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Morning Glory. We've got lots more to do. We're going to talk about prison guards who seem to be of the opinion that having sex with drug dealer inmates is a good idea. And also we're going to be talking about a really bizarre show at the Royal Court Theatre, which I'm pretty sure is being backed by Arts Council money. It's called Cow Deer. And it's got, I'm sorry to say this, it's got no words at all, it's got no dialogue, it's just got noises made by cows and deers, and people are going there going, this needs to be great, isn't it? And you're sitting there, you might as well go to a farm, right, sit in a field, listen to the cows mooing. That's how they sound. That's what they sound like. Deer, not so much. But, you know, people are paying money to sit in a London theatre. This is when you know that you've reached sort of peak ridiculousness and complete and utter, you know, decrepit civilization, because you're so dangerously and stupidly self-absorbed that you think sitting in a chair listening to the noise a cow makes is actually entertainment. I mean, for God's sake. Anyway, here we are. I think the music's stopped. We've been going on so long that we've run over. Tom, very good morning to you. I don't know what to say, literally, about Rachel Reeves. I mean, she did, like I say, she got up yesterday as she was walking out of Downing Street, smiling, big smile on her face, you know, like, look, it's me, it's my big day, first day at school, I'm really happy about it. What's she got to be happy about? And why is she wearing a onesie? What is going on with that? You know, I mean, I'm all for, you know, people. I don't mind Vladimir Zelensky going to the White House and not putting a suit on. But if you're going to, you know, deliver a budget, what are you doing wearing something that the chavs wear when they get on EasyJet to go to, you know, Turkey for the summer?
Well, it's like those videos that they put out of her kind of steaming ahead, you know, towards
full steam ahead.
You can understand they were trying to project this kind of sense of she's in charge, she's being, she's got a grip on this, she's ready to go. And yet,
yes, she was expecting all this.
And yet she's ready to announce, you know, growth forecast being slashed. She's ready to announce sweeping cuts which are going to push, you know, 250,000 people into poverty. I really don't think she understands just how badly all of this is landing.
Hang on, look at this. We got Keir Starmer putting his hand on her, like he did with old Donald Trump. You know, he's got his hand on her and he leaves it there too long. What's wrong with it? He doesn't understand the rules of engagement with touching people.
He can't do normal, can he, Keir Starmer? He always looks like a bit of a cold fish in these situations.
And he's like, got half an eye on the camera. Let's have another look at it. She's about to sit down. He wants to congratulate her. It's almost like he wants to rub her back. Look, he's put his hand on her. Said 1, 2, 3, 4. It's too long. It's literally 1 second is enough, right? That's it. Don't put your hand on a woman's shoulder just because she works with you for more than one. In fact, don't do it at all. But if you're going to do it, 1 second. Not
and you can see in his
2,
face.
3, 4. I mean, come on.
He's like building up to that as well. You can tell that he wanted to do that. He wanted to send some kind of message. It's all for the cameras, but he just can't make it not look like he's a marionette. it's very
it's really bad.
Difficult for him.
Because it reminds me, we might have to go back to that White House moment. We maybe have to dig that one out, where he goes, you know, I've got a letter for you, and he pulls it out, Uriah Heep, and he gives it to him, and then as he opens it, puts his hand, yes, because you must open it now, and then again it's the 1, 2, 3, 4. It's too long. It's just 5 seconds too long. Just horrible.
And you know, been practicing that in the mirror all week.
Yeah.
Desperately trying to get it
and there's
right.
somebody behind the scenes in Downing Street going, and this is what you do, and this is the moment when you do it, and they're just so awful at it, aren't they? It's embarrassing.
No, and it's that always attempt to kind of force themselves to look normal in front of the cameras and failing miserably.
I'm very normal. Here I am wearing a onesie, you know, being paid the best part of £200,000 a year, telling you all that everything's going to be fine. I'm going to cut the growth forecast, but don't worry, that doesn't mean that we won't have any growth. It's just ridiculous. Let's have a look at Mel Stride. He was speaking, of course, as the Shadow Chancellor after her speech, and this is what he had to say.
She chose to be reckless with a sliver of headroom against her fiddled targets. She borrowed and spent and taxed like it was the 1970s. Little wonder, Mr. Speaker, that the Chancellor has tanked the economy. Little wonder we have an emergency budget, all because of her choices.
I mean, it is. I mean, look at the front pages this morning, and they are not good. Reeves squeezed by Trump is on the front page of the Times, and that basically says, there's another picture of her looking very, very happy in her onesie, carrying her little red box, saying that basically Trump is about to unleash a bunch of tariffs on Britain next week, which is going to completely and utterly kibosh everything she said yesterday anyway.
No, absolutely. She's spent all of this political capital, upset all kinds of people in her own party, upset the charity sector, as you've been reading from some of the front pages there this morning, all to just carve out this roughly kind of 10 billion bit of fiscal headroom that got wiped out by the borrowing cost shooting up. As all these stories are pointing out, it could, you know, the Trump tariffs, all kinds of other kind of economic factors could wipe that out once again. It's a tiny sliver of headroom. So she could easily, I mean, people talk about her having to, you know, come back in the autumn and, you know, swallow some bitter medicine. That could happen even sooner, just because of the fact that she's made a lot of people unhappy, continuing to preside over a stagnating economy, and yet all she'd have done is please the OBR for 24 hours. That's basically what the upshot of this budget looks like it will be.
The main kind of analysis with the OBR seems to be, and Liz Truss is one of those who says it, and we'll play a clip from her in a minute, is that the OBR basically is a sort of an invented institution which has sort of outlived its usefulness because nobody pays any attention to it now because they get everything wrong.
No, absolutely. I mean, people talk about it as if it's like part of the Constitution, like it's been around since Magna Carta.
As if you should believe everything they say, and you know their words are godlike.
I mean, George Osborne set this up during the coalition years. It's got so many forecasts wrong, as pretty much all the economic forecasters tend to get absolutely everything wrong. And yet we're supposed to treat it as if it's like some kind of sage who understands absolutely everything, can foresee the future. And yet that's
the tablets of wisdom coming down from on high. Oh, what does the OBR say? You know, well, don't worry about it. They're getting it all wrong.
Exactly, and the entire statement was just geared towards making sure the sums add up according to the OBR. That was the primary audience for it. So if this is who is marking our homework and they get absolutely everything wrong, why are we in this position?
Why are we even asking them to mark the homework? Let's see what Liz Truss has to say about the OBR.
The fact is that there needs to be serious change to our system in order to get out of the economic hole we face. The executive need to be in charge of making decisions, not the bureaucracy. That means repealing and dismantling the Blairite state. It means returning accountability to the Bank of England. It means abolishing the Office of Budget Responsibility. It means repealing the Climate Change Act 2008 and getting on with fracking. These are the types of measures we need in order to get Britain back on the right track.
Now, if she was leader of the Tory party, you'd go, actually, that sounds quite good, doesn't it? Sounds like she's got the idea. This is what Keir Starmer put out as a tweet yesterday afternoon at 3:45, right, after all the dust had settled, after everybody had kind of had their say on Rachel Reeves' ghastly, useless budget. He said this: wages growing faster than prices, jobs up, inflation down, interest rates down, NHS waiting list down, houses and infrastructure unblocked, free breakfast clubs rolling out, national living wage increasing, national minimum wage increasing, defence spending increased, 2 million more NHS appointments delivered, house building to be at the highest level in 40 years, people to be, this is my favourite, people to be £500 better off a year, and the Tories block change for Britain. My Labour government is delivering it. maybe he should join Rachel in the padded cell. I mean, seriously. I mean, he's also a man for the white coats, isn't he? How deluded are these people?
It's delusional. It's also just sort of lying to the public. And
there
people
is that.
can see
there
through
is that.
this. You know, they know that things are not looking bright out there. They also know that as a consequence of this budget, you know, whether you could talk about the need for longer term reform, there's going to be an awful lot of people who are not doing particularly well in life, who are reliant on the system for good or for ill, who are going to have their benefits cut. So to try and spin this as it's all the kind of sunlit uplands doesn't make any sense whatsoever. No. And the fact that this is quite clearly a product not just of like ideology but just sheer incompetence is also something that makes it really hard to swallow.
That's the thing that I think people are really, really annoyed with, is that, you know, people were prepared. I was one of them. I knew that this would not be a great Labour government for me personally. I knew that, you know, I would probably disagree with most of their policies and probably not be that happy about the way that they were going to change the way that the school curriculum was going to go, or the way that they might introduce more kind of DEI rules for companies and all of that. But I wasn't expecting them to be this useless. Yeah. And that's the thing that annoys me the most. This from Dave, who says this: Mike, everyone can see Reeves is delusional, as the Daily Mail puts it, but the biggest worry is why nobody is getting rid of her. That makes Starmer even worse than her. She's got to go. And David says, morning Mike, Rachel from accounts, if she did step down, who is the successor? There's no evidence that anyone in the current cabinet could even recognise a calculator, let alone a spreadsheet. But, you know, we're always told, are we not, that the Treasury's full of all these brilliant people, full of amazing officials who will make sure that the Chancellor's looked after, that she's sort of, you know, feather nested and basically nothing really comes to her harm because they're protecting her. Now, they've either thrown her to the wolves or they've led her down a garden path and made her look stupid. I don't know which of those two things is right.
I mean, a lot of this is what happens when you just blindly follow the supposed experts, the mandarins. I mean, this has always been Rachel Reeves' kind of pitch, was that the last Tory government, particularly the kind of brief Liz Truss interlude, ripped up the orthodoxy, it defied the Office for Budget Responsibility, and we saw where that ended up. She's done the complete opposite. She's empowered the Office for Budget Responsibility. She's basically said that I'm going to be someone who's going to implement the orthodoxy, even to the point of getting in trouble. I mean, the winter fuel payments is something that Treasury mandarins have thought should be done for a very long time. Right. That any chancellor of any politics about them knew that that would blow up in their face. Not Rachel Reeves, who just blindly followed what it is that they wanted to suggest to her. So this is what happens when you just blindly follow the orthodoxy, when you don't have a kind of clear sense of vision. You defer to the people who are supposed experts, but as we've learned many times over the years, that a lot of these experts don't know anything that
they don't know anything at all, and they're basically projecting what they think should happen and what they think they should say, and they've been proven wrong so many times. The Mail's done a good thing, because yesterday we were talking about and we had Kemi Badenoch in a couple of days ago, and she was saying that, you know, during PMQs now they just play Starmer bingo and wait for him to come out with these ridiculous phrases and words. The Mail has done a bit of an analysis on the Chancellor's buzzwords yesterday and how many times she said them. She said working people 15 times, stability 10 times, the party's opposite 10 times, Britain's future 4 times, fiscal rules 4 times, families 4 times, uncertainty 3 times, and uncertain world 3 times as well. I was actually, we're going to try and find out, because I was asking yesterday how soon will it be before she mentions the £22 billion black hole. I said it was going to be within 2 minutes. Apparently it was in a first 8 minutes. So that's a bit longer than I thought.
Well, she's mixing it up a little bit, you know, which is to her credit, I suppose. But who is right? People are paid to write these speeches, and yet they're so repetitive, covered in buzzwords. Right. You know, wooden.
Well, as you've just seen from what I just read out from Keir Starmer, I assume that they believe this stuff. I assume that he actually genuinely thinks. And I've got a bone to pick with the NHS waiting list coming down, because I'm sure, and I'm going to stick with this until I find the truth out, because you know how often we say things and they turn out to be true some months later. People are saying, oh yeah, they're cutting down the waiting list. I'm hearing more and more people saying that they got an appointment with the NHS after waiting months and months and months, and then about a week before the appointment's due, it gets cancelled. So what they're basically doing is moving people from one waiting list to another, thereby cutting down the first waiting list, but actually not solving the problem. And I think that's quite a clever and very cynical move, and I will be absolutely, I put my house on the fact that they're doing it deliberately.
And even if
because it smells wrong to me.
And even if it's starting to come down, even in any kind of measure, like people know that this is that would be barely the beginning. Things are so bleak out there, and the idea that this tinkering around the edges is that even some things get worse is going to help.
Absolutely. Talking of Prime Minister's questions, just before Rachel Reeves got up in her onesie to give her Chancellor's budget, which of course it wasn't. You don't call it a budget; it's not allowed. That wasn't going to be a budget, but it's a spring statement. Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, was asked whether it was time to sack Rachel Reeves.
I have full confidence in the Chancellor. Thank you.
Of course he does. He's so tetchy, isn't he?
Yep.
He really can't stand it. He must be hating this. He must be really hating his job, which I find strangely amusing.
He's certainly making it look very difficult, isn't he?
He is.
He's prickly. He doesn't deal with kind of criticism and challenge particularly well.
No.
He's so not light on his feet when it comes to these things. I mean, he's been a bit lucky as far as he hasn't really got the real kind of going over at Prime Minister's questions that maybe we might have expected, given how flat-footed he is.
Right.
But he's certainly not a man who looks like he's enjoying himself.
He really doesn't, no. It's coming up to 20 minutes past 6. I'm Mike Graham. We'll be back with more after this.
fed up of hearing, and that is this government blaming global instability, the changes in the international situation, in brackets, what they really mean is Donald Trump, that they can't stand. You know, the excuse is a very thin one, really, because the fundamental problems facing our economy are not caused by President Putin's appalling invasion of Ukraine, nor by the election of the new US president.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
From 2% in the autumn to 1% today.
Yeah, just cut everything in half, basically. It's a shame we can't halve the number of people in the Cabinet, half the number of people in the House of Lords, half the number of people in the Labour Party, half the number of people on the opposition benches. We could save a bucket load of money then. Half the number of people working in the civil service. You know, I think that's an idea, because if you're going to have growth which is being cut in half, why not have expenditure cut in half? You know, she talked a lot yesterday about the idea of chopping billions and billions of pounds off the public sector spending account, but nobody really believes any of that. Tom Slater's here. Let's move off old Rachel Reeves for a minute, though, because there's a great story that I spotted earlier on. They put it quite far back in the Daily Mail, page 23 today. But this is about the census, the last census that was done, I think in 2021. And much was made of the fact that, you know, there's a lot more trans people out there than you think, right? We talk about trans all the time. We just had the big story this week that I think the World Athletics Organisation is going to make it possible for people to have a swab test to work out whether they're male or female. I would suggest a different test, but, you know, that's just me. But the National Statistics Office have admitted, basically, that when they said that there were 262,000 trans individuals in the census, which meant that basically a lot more people than we thought, that was actually a made-up figure. It's not true.
And like so many figures around this, because of the fact that the vast majority of people, when we talk about trans and gender and cis and whatnot, all these kind of activist terms that have been sort of cooked up in recent years. Most people have no idea what they mean. There was this big round run up to the 2021 census about how you would collect this particular bit of data. There was concerns that sex and gender were just being completely conflated. What they ended up settling on was this really bizarre formulation, this question, which is the gender you identify with the same as your sex registered at birth? Most people would really struggle to work out what the hell that means.
I don't even know what that means, really.
And then one thing they found was that for people for whom English is not their first language, they were 4 times more likely to be registered as trans as a consequence of this, which is everything you need to know. Like, if you allow all this activist speaking and this warping of reality and so on, you're going to end up with just the officialdom not even being able to count properly as a consequence of that.
It's sort of like asking Manuel from Fawlty Towers that question, isn't it? You know, what is it? Is the gender you identify with the same as your sex registered at birth? Okay. You'd be going, oh yeah, just put me down as a yes. Okay then. I mean, it's ridiculous though. But what this tells you, and the fact is the bosses at the Office for National Statistics say that these statistics should not be used as an exact reflection of the population, i.e., they're made up and they're wrong and they're ridiculous. I've always said, I always question statistics, I always question polls, I always question, you know, scientists who go, oh yeah, but all these people believe this, or all these people have said that. Well, yeah, but it shows that this is a flawed concept. It's a flawed way to collect data, and to rely on data as people do now so much to do anything is wrong, completely and utterly wrong. You know as well as I do, we have a sense of things in this country, people like us who actually, you know, do this for a living, and you know when something is being, you know, played to you, and you think, hang on a minute, there's not 262,000 trans people in this country. There's probably about, you know, maybe 2,000 at best.
And it's one of those things as well where, like, we all knew that this kind of corruption in statistics was going on. Like, there was that Sullivan review that was published last week, which really laid this out in detail. But everyone has known, if you're going around, kind of, some places are basically using self-ID as the criteria, others are not. It's created a situation in which the state really struggles to work out, even in terms of allocating resources, what it should do. You've had bizarre situations in recent years where people have said, oh, there's an alarming, unprecedented rise in women committing sexual offences or whatever, when it's not the case. It's men committing those offences who are choosing to identify as women, often to try and get into women's prisons and so on. It's we've all known this is a nonsense, as you say, and yet these statistics are trotted out as if they're supposed to be fine and accurate. We're seeing through all of that
and
now,
so what we can now also say, I think with absolute assurity, is that people who are coming up with this sort of stuff are doing it because it's their agenda. So there'll be people working basically in the Office for National Statistics who have got themselves jobs in there for the very purpose of making out that actually they'll tell a lie to the British public, and they'll say, look, here's the census, it proves beyond a shadow of a doubt there's a lot more trans people in the country than you ever thought. Well, actually it turns out no, you just made that up.
And
it's shocking.
One institution after another has been captured by this ideology, something that, you know, 5-10 years ago people really had no clue about whatsoever. And it's gotten to the point where it's almost all of the kind of statistics from this time period in this country is going to have like a little asterisk next to it saying they went mad for about 10 years here.
And
they tried
to use what they called scientific measures to prove that they were right, and it turned out they just lied. I think it's absolutely shocking, because so much money has been driven into it as well, public money, taxpayers' money, to presumably follow the money, as it were, and follow the lead of this census and say, oh, well, obviously there's a lot more trans people out there than we thought, so we better give more money to councils, we better give more money to charity groups, we better give more money to awareness about all of this, because it's clearly a massive problem, when it clearly isn't a massive problem. And another step in the right direction, and another victory for common... Have we still got the victory for common sense that we used yesterday? We will have. Sussex University has been fined £585,000 over a transgender row which ended in an academic being driven out of her job. That was the former lecturer Kathleen Stock. You might remember she was fired from the University of Sussex for being basically a commonsensical woman who didn't recognise the fact that trans should change the way that she taught her lectures.
And the way she was edged out of that institution was absolutely shameful. She became the target for all kinds of horrendous protests, people showing off on campus with, you know, all dressed up in black,
rent a mob,
letting off flares, physical intimidation. You know, she had a panic button installed by the police in her house. All the while, the university did not stand by her, and even her own union branch essentially sided with the people who were menacing her.
Who were menacing her,
It's what a horrendous story, and you hope that it's just coming towards some kind of conclusion now.
Yeah, I mean, basically, the investigation by the legal people said that they found that Sussex's transgender equality policy had a chilling effect on Professor Stock's views, as well as those of students and other staff. The policy forced tutors to positively represent trans people and trans lives in their teaching, and banned what they called transphobic propaganda. Which, again, I would bet my bottom dollar was based upon that census, that there's 262,000 trans people in Britain.
I mean, it was all of this was coming up at the same time, wasn't it? I remember that particular policy, because in terms of universities, you used to see that crop up across the board. Loads of universities having the same policy almost at exactly the same time, with this phrase transphobic propaganda being banned within there. It's incredible how much this has just been done by kind of duplication, and them all following what Stonewall or what any of the other kind of organisations have just said. This is the right policy. It turns out what they considered the right policy was the one that green lights this kind of censorship and intimidation. So we're slowly starting to unpick these things, but it's only really the beginning.
Absolutely. And I think we should go after all those people who demonstrated against her, the people who were, not, you know, I mean, I'm not going to be one to say that we shouldn't have, you know, the freedom to demonstrate, but these are not demonstrations. These are intimidatory, you know, mobs who turn up covered in black, wearing balaclavas, covering their faces, and literally frightening people into complying with what they think is the right way to be.
And what message does it send to the other academics in that institution or across the board, that if you know, if you traverse these kind of like tripwires, if you say these things that you're not supposed to say, your academic freedom means nothing, we're not going to stand by you, even if, just on the basis of this is someone who you employ, who is being harassed and intimidated. The fact that this institution, and we've seen many other cases like that, have been deemed to have, at best, kind of stood by and looked the other way. It's really, really shocking on every level.
It absolutely is. Morning, Mike, says somebody who doesn't give a name, actually. Great show. Raid the NHS waiting list. I had a biopsy on October the 10th of last year. I had to wait until March the 3rd for results, and was told that I would now have to wait 9 to 10 months for my operation. So I wonder whether that person has been given, has been taken off the waiting list on the basis that they've been given an appointment for 10 months away. But what will happen is over the course of the next 10 months, they'll have it cancelled probably. And then see, I'm sure that that's the thing, and I'd love to hear from many of you out there who have had this experience. Jules in London says this: this is like a really bad appearance on Stars in Their Eyes. Rachel from accounts reappears in a puff of smoke as the Chancellor of the Exchequer. She is way out of her depth. Let's get a voice note from Kelly.
Good morning, Mike. This is my first time doing a voice note, so I'm a little bit nervous. So Rachel Reeves has gone after PIP, disability, DLA, and also now health element of universal credit. I am a full-time home carer for my son, who is autistic, practically non-verbal. He hasn't managed to go to school since year 6, and even at that point, it was very sporadic. I understand there are people out there that take the absolute mickey out of the system, but there are genuine people who are going to get hit by this, and it just seems she's hitting the wrong people, in my opinion. I understand it needs to be reformed and looked at, but there's got to be a better way than doing this.
There's absolutely no doubt about that. Kelly, thank you very much indeed. And for a first-time voice noter, you did terribly well, so well done, and please do it again. The bottom line is that the Joseph Browntree Foundation, who are, you know, relatively well-respected charitable organisation, I'm not a big fan of theirs, but they've come out and basically said 250,000 people are now going to be pushed into poverty. They've basically said that Rachel Reeves is building, as it says on the front page of the Mirror, balancing the books on the backs of the poor, you know, so they've lost, she's lost that particular room. Basically, it says here on the front of the I newspaper, 800,000 people will lose disability benefits. Analysis shows 250,000 people, including 50,000 children, will be pushed into poverty. Growth prospects are going to be better in the longer term, but stubbornly high inflation prompts a new mortgage warning. And again, you know, this is a woman who doesn't appear to have a clue about how to fix any of the things that she's broken.
Absolutely, and these cuts are the result of failure because of the fact that the economic outlook has become even bleaker recently because of the fact this much hallowed headroom of hers, which was always tiny to begin with, got wiped out by events. She's had to go back and try to fiddle around with these disability benefits, fiddle around with the various kind of schemes that are involved to try and basically make the OBR say, yes, your sums add up. And it's a really grim spectacle. You can be concerned about the broader kind of welfare picture and recognise why this cut in particular is both kind of mean-spirited and just out of a kind of beam countering sort of approach to politics, rather than, this isn't about saying the system's broken, let's reform it, let's make sure that the incentives are right. This is just about again, balancing the books off the back of people who are really going to feel that impact in the short term.
Because everything that's ever happened when any government has tried to reform benefits, and many have tried before, you know, George Osborne tried it, Tony Blair tried it, but there's no doubt that there's many, many more people now claiming benefits than there ever were before. But instead of going after the right people who should not be getting benefits, they always end up punishing the wrong people, because the right people who are very good at hiding whatever it is that they're pretending they've got are very, very good at getting benefits and gaming the system because they know how to do it. And the poor people who are suffering at the bottom end of it are the ones who are genuinely, you know, disabled and genuinely need help, and they're the ones that get screwed. And a
lot of the times they make these choices because it's easier more than anything else, or because they're less concerned about the political capital they might show in this particular area because they're focusing on other things. It's just it's a really unseemly business, and the fact that this was all done purely just to please the supposed geniuses at the OBR, rather than any kind of longer-term vision about where welfare should go. It's unseemly, definitely.
It does seem as though they're just sort of taking a great big brush and going, boom, let's just get rid of all those people. You know, oh, sorry, we seem to have hurt a few people that were in wheelchairs. You know, sorry about that. Unbelievable. Carolina in Bath says, morning, Mike. Reeves and Rodney are an embarrassment and so cringeworthy. Great show as always. Yeah, I mean, that picture, I'm sorry, I'm going to keep talking about it. The picture of him, Starmer, putting his hand on her shoulder. It's really creepy. I don't know why it makes me cringe so much, but here it is. If you're not watching, she's about to sit. She sat down. Here he goes. He puts his arm. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He's still there 5 seconds later. Just do it to yourself and think about it. Like, put your hand on your shoulder. I can't reach you, Tom, otherwise I would do it and it would be a really horrible moment. But imagine this, right? So here's Rachel Reeves' arm, and you go, sit down, Rachel, thank you very much indeed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, you try putting your hand on somebody that you work with for that long and see what happens. Because I think it's creepy, I think it's weird, I think there's something wrong with it, and I think it should be absolutely and utterly called out for what it is, which is just fake, bizarre, and really, really odd. You know, the two robots from government who don't actually know how to behave like human beings. That's what we're talking about, fixing the foundations. I'll just put my hand on your shoulder for 5 seconds. 1, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yay! This is talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. This, of course, is the home of common sense at 6:39. I've got a message from Margot here who says, I love Tom Slater. How about that?
There we go.
I'll pass you on to her later. Lots and lots of you getting in touch. Lots of things to say. Well done, Mike. Well done for managing to get 2 Labour cabinet ministers on Morning Glory recently. You must be mellowing in your old age. If you continue in this vein, you'll be deflecting to the BBC or ITV and doing Plank of the Week with Robbie Peston. Only joking. We still love you. It's Alan in Middlesbrough. Listen, it's nothing to do with me. We've been asking Labour to come on for you know, the last 9 months, right? And I think until this week we'd had, I think, 2 government ministers, very junior ones. This week we managed to get the Defence Minister, Luke Pollard, and another bloke on Monday. I was quite surprised. Oh, no, it was Heidi Alexander, actually, we got, who was talking about Heathrow. So, I mean, it's Labour who have decided to, you know, grant us, you know, the great honour of being able to interview cabinet ministers. It's nothing to do with me. I don't mind getting them on, but if I do get them on, I'll give them a hard time. Yeah, and I'll ask them proper questions.
How nice of them to grace you with their presence.
I know. I mean, we only represent quite a lot of taxpayers, you know, who actually are being asked to fund their ridiculous, you know, let's ruin Britain project. You know, I think we have a right to actually get them on. But anyway, there we are. Let's talk about the other way that things are going wrong. Page 2 of The Sun, judges go softer on deporting illegals. We have a little slot here called Migrant of the Day, and we haven't found one today yet, but we will do. Top judges stirred up fresh anger last night for proposing soft punishments that would let immigration offenders dodge deportation. We know that we've got this ridiculous immigration panel system, haven't we, where people claim all sorts of things, from chicken nuggets not being acceptable to their children to, you know, I'm an alcoholic, I can't be sent back to Pakistan because, you know, they would punish me for drinking alcohol. My favourite still being the Nigerian psychopath who was apparently basically possessed by the devil, so couldn't be sent back to Nigeria. There's one after another of these stories. I mean, it's ridiculous, isn't it?
No, absolutely. It's the Sentencing Council striking again, you know, after the horrendous 2-tier guidelines they issued a few weeks ago in terms of pre-sentencing reports. And it's almost like guidelines like this is surplus to requirements. The judges are already going way out on a limb to say that it doesn't matter if you're a sex offender, it doesn't matter if you've murdered people, it doesn't matter if you're an Albanian crime lord.
You still have a right to a family life.
Absolutely. Even if you're not allowed to see your own children because you've sexually abused children in the past. This is a farce. Like I think people have really started to wake up to this now. There's a drumbeat every single day now of stories like this. And people have had enough of it. I think you would be hard-pressed to find anyone, literally anyone.
We've also had, and I'm going to keep repeating this until people get the understanding that this is true, because, again, something we've been saying for a long time, we've now got statistical information which tells you how many sex offences are being committed and by which nationalities. And by far and away, the hugest number of sex offences being committed are being committed by people who are not British. And it's as simple as that.
Especially if you allow for so much illegal migration. A lot of those people are going to be criminals. Not exclusively. There's some of them, I mean, they will by dint of the fact they've entered the country illegally. But it's the sort of thing where if someone is willing to enter the country illegally, if they end up working in the black market, if they end up side of society, there's a pretty high chance that some of those people won't be fleeing war and persecution abroad, but will be fleeing charges abroad. In some cases, terror charges
or fleeing gang activities where they might be in danger in some way because they've murdered someone.
I mean, people have claimed asylum basically on those grounds. I think there was another kind of Albanian gangster who said, you can't send me back to Albania because I've upset the other Albanian gangsters. It's a complete farce.
There was a famous one of the guy from a car wash in Leicester who said he couldn't be sent home because there was a sort of a bounty on his back from some family, and they said, well, why is that then? And he said, well, it's because I murdered my wife. And so her family want to kill me. And you're kind of going, oh, that's fine then. You just carry on washing cars in Leicester because you're a murderer. I mean, do me a favour.
Does anyone really think that when all of these human rights conventions were drawn up and we came up with this system that we have now, that this is what they had in mind? That it would basically become the right of paedophiles to have a family life, or the right of Albanian gangsters to, have a quiet life. That really wasn't why it was drawn up. We need to recognise that.
Yeah, we need to recognise that. And it was also not at a time when people could travel in the way that they now do and arrive on our shores. I mean, I think somebody gave the figure of the numbers of illegals that have come here since something like 2019, and it's about 150,000. So pretty soon, by the end of this year, you'll be looking at possibly 200,000 people, which is, the population of a reasonably good-sized town in this country. And of course, up until about a year ago, all the lefties and the kind of, the Liberals were saying, oh, it's a very small number, I don't know why you're getting so worked up about it. It's not a small number now, it's 200,000 people, and that is a very big number. Thank you very much indeed.
And also a small number of people can do a lot of damage if they have if they are criminals, if they are dangerous, if they are terrorists. This is why you have borders. It's not because everyone who wants to come to your country is some kind of wrong. It's that you need to be able to work out who is and who isn't,
exactly,
who's here legitimately and who isn't, because otherwise you don't know who those people are.
Because the logic of the people who say those things is that you just do away with passport control, and when people get off planes at Heathrow and Gatwick, they just walk into the country. There's no point in checking their passports. Why would you bother? There are obviously people coming here for a good reason, so let's just wave them all in. And that's the equivalent of what they're doing, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's everyone knows how ridiculously naive, ridiculously open to exploitation it is. I think for a long time we just weren't aware of the full extent of what was going on in these immigration panels and so on. Now that we're getting basically a story a day, I think that the public weren't wearing it before, but they're definitely not going to wear it now.
They're definitely not wearing it now. But it's good to know that also the ridiculousness of our judicial system is not only limited to people who are coming here from abroad. Also here at home, we've got a similar judge problem, although this is an Italian guy called Marco Taffoni, who was done for shoplifting. He stole £15,000 worth of luxury sort of designer handbags from Harrods. He worked at Harrods, by the way, and he sold them off for £5,000 because he was under significant financial pressure. He was up before the Beak yesterday. Judge Sarah Panith said that Taffoni was struggling to make ends meet when he carried out his offences, and so she gave him a 6-month prison sentence, suspended, so he doesn't go to jail for stealing 15 grand's worth of stuff from Harrods when he was actually working there. I mean, what is going on?
I mean, there's always...
Does anybody get any punishment anywhere?
Well, that's the other thing, isn't it? You just think it's incredibly difficult unless you've said something on the internet, in which case that's an entirely different kettle of fish.
Absolutely right, yeah.
But, obviously, in terms of sentencing guidance and so on, there's certain mitigating factors that come into play insofar as people say, are they the sole carer for someone?
Yeah.
Are they, have they got small children?
Have they fallen on hard times?
I know, it does get to the point where you're just undermining the basis of the law, the fact that if you break certain laws you should expect a certain kind of punishment. It's just and especially in the context of shoplifting and all the rest of it being out of control, it's just even crazier.
I mean, that's not hardly going to sort of dissuade people from nicking handbags at Harrods, is it? Because if you nick £15,000 worth of handbags, you make £5,000 on it, you probably don't have to pay that back, and you get a suspended sentence, so everybody's happy.
No, absolutely.
It's mad. It's completely mad.
And again, we're just seeing things like this day in, day out now. At the moment, people are really starting to lose faith in whether or not the criminal justice system can operate in any reasoned,
there's definitely a sense that Britain basically is now broken. It doesn't work in any way, shape or form. The judiciary doesn't work, the police don't work, the welfare system doesn't work, the NHS doesn't work. You can go through the whole gamut of all the things that don't work, the court system, the prison system, nothing. This from George, who says, "Morning, Mike, great show as always. The utter madness of the trans activism is the basic denial of fundamental biology. Once truth is lost, all is lost. Isn't it odd that they claim that having sexual organs from a particular sex does not define their preferred gender, but removal of those organs does?" That's a good point, actually. It's true. Again, another kind of, smoke and mirrors conversation that we've been having for years about something which to a child is obvious. But instead what we've got is parents telling their children, oh, it's all right for you to be trans, it's all right for you to be, and particularly sort of middle class wealthy parents, because apparently the biggest problem in trans activism is in private schools, believe it or not, and particularly girls' private schools, where lots of girls have decided they want to be boys, and their parents are going, oh, isn't it cute, little Jacinda, she wants to be a boy, oh, super, isn't it marvellous, so trendy, did you know that that woman from, is it Cynthia Nixon from Sex and the City, all of her children are trans? Well, it's marvellous, isn't it? Not bloody marvellous, it's sick, wrong and deluded.
And what are the when people try to pretend like there isn't a very large element of social contagion, as they say in the jargon about this, you've got to ask, why is this not equally distributed across the population, like being gay, for instance, or these sorts of things? It's because of the fact that there's clearly an element of this being propagandised to children of a certain background, particularly kind of upper middle class kids. The fact that there's
kids who've got nothing else to worry about, in other words.
Exactly, and also because there's a fact that there's with those sorts of children who might be experiencing certain mental health problems or whatever, they're in a social climate, social set in which that could be pushed down the avenue of maybe this is about your gender, maybe you're actually gender dysphoric, whatever. It's clearly played a role here, as is the fact that we've gone in the space of a generation, basically, from the transgender question being almost exclusively male to female to in the opposite direction. Shows you that a lot of this is about ideologues and the culture shifting
and fashion
and yeah, absolutely,
and fashion. I'm afraid that's what it is. Let's get a voice note from James on tariffs.
Good morning, Mike. Now, I don't know why all the lefties are having a go at Trump for putting tariffs on the UK. Not being funny, Mike, but you've got an absolute prat of a Prime Minister and a Foreign Secretary calling him a neo-Nazi sympathiser, whatever that was. And also Starmer saying, I'm anti-Trump, every 10 seconds just to get himself elected. What an absolute prat he is. And what's all this obsession with all this touching? I mean, it's like Biden. I remember Joe Biden, all that sniffing he used to do. Anyway, Mike, have a lovely day, mate.
It's true. There's something very odd about it. I mean, maybe we'll have to collect some kind of collage of, Keir Starmer touching people. It's just very strange. Nobody knows. There's a question here about where's Starmer's wedding ring from Ellen. I don't know. I haven't checked out his hand. I don't know whether he had a wedding ring, whether he's taken his wedding ring off. I've no idea. All I know is that at the end of the day, you don't touch women that you work with. And you don't touch men that you work with either, to be honest. You don't put your hand on President Trump's shoulder and leave it there. You don't put your hand on the Chancellor of the Exchequer's shoulder and leave it there. And that's what he's doing. He's trying to make out that he's Mr. Chummy. He's everybody's mate. And he's not everybody's mate. He's everybody's complete and utter plank. Really? Shall we do it? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yay!
Oh, my God. There's something very strange about it and odd. Rachel Thieves and Starmer together. God save us. If Reeves is getting everyone off disability and helping them back to work, what happens if they can't get a job or do get one, then lose it due to the struggle to keep it as it's too painful to carry on? Do they then have to apply to sign back on benefits? If so, is she going to save nothing? Zoe in Lancashire. Good point. I don't know. Once again, everything that she says is not well thought out. Nothing really has an answer. And that's why Keir Starmer doesn't answer questions at PMQs, because he doesn't really have an answer. He doesn't really know the answer. His answer is to basically put his hand on someone and leave it there for 5 seconds. Unbelievable. It's 10 to 7. I don't know where the time's going. Tom Slater and I back after this.
Listening to how bad all the economic indicators are, where what we saw was that growth has halved compared to forecast, cost of borrowing is up, unemployment is up, so many economic indicators going in the wrong direction, and what that means is bad news for businesses and for people's livelihoods. So it was really disappointing to sit and hear all that, and so much a consequence of the bad decisions that the Chancellor has made since Labour got into power, including their really damaging jobs tax and national insurance rise.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:53. I'm Mike Graham here with you until 10 o'clock. 4 glorious hours of Morning Glory. It's the day after the big budget statement, B-Day we called it yesterday, and it certainly does look as though things have taken a little turn for the worse. There is not one newspaper this morning, ladies and gentlemen, that has anything good to say about Rachel Reeves. Even The Guardian and The Mirror have turned on her. It is quite remarkable. But let's have a look at something from the other side of the Atlantic, because we've been talking all week about Trump and his tariffs. We've been talking about the digital leak from that conversation that took place on Signal, which is still rumbling on. Marjorie Taylor Greene, of course, is a rather famously, shall we say, relatively loose-lipped and foul-mouthed congresswoman in America. Here she is dealing with a Sky News reporter in America.
Anybody else?
Should the Defence Secretary...
What country are you... Wait, what country are you from?
From the UK.
Okay, we don't give a crap about your opinion and your reporting. Why don't you go back to your country where you have a major migrant problem?
Okay,
and you... No. You should care about your own borders.
Do you care about American lives being put at risk?
Let me tell you something. Do you care about people from your country? What about all the women that are raped by migrants?
Do you care
No,
about...
by migrants. No, do you care? Okay, you're done.
Do you care about American lives being put at risk?
You know what? I don't care.
Service members fighting for your country.
I don't care about your fake news. Do you have a relevant question? Yeah, this is an American journalist. Thank you.
I'm an American, and I'd like to hear your answer to what she's asked.
I'm not answering her question because I don't care about her network. If you would like to ask, I can answer.
I mean, slightly over the top, but it gives you an idea of how America's thinking at the moment, doesn't it? Particularly, you know, the Trump administration. She's not in it. Yeah. She's not part of it. She's part of the right wing, though, of American Congress. And their view of Britain is that Britain is busted, that we've got migrants running all over the place, raping women, that we've got borders that are so soft that anybody can walk into them, all of which is true, right? And there's nothing anybody's doing about it.
And, you know, far be it from me to take Marjorie Taylor Greene as like a perfect representation of where America is at generally. She's a bit crackers around the edges, which is fair to say.
She did tell Emily Matless to F off, so I'm quite pleased
also,
about
if her intention is to sort of humiliate these journalists, she just keeps handing them kind of viral moments.
Yeah.
You know? She's probably got a raise after that.
Yeah, probably.
Kind of confrontation with Marjorie Taylor Greene. So
No,
it's backfiring.
no, you're right. I mean, she is slightly, you know, sort of mad, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
But the point is that is how sort of ordinary people in America will look at that and go, this is what's going on in Britain. Yeah, that's the perception of what Britain's got. No free speech, like J.D. Vance said, and every time everybody goes, he's talking absolute rubbish, what would he know? Somebody else gets locked up for something they did on Facebook. Yeah, I mean, you know, and we have got a migrant problem that's out of control, and we have got grooming gangs and rape gangs raping young white girls, and it's all true.
And I think the issue is, because a lot of Americans see the UK purely through the prism of X, like they genuinely think that like Keir Starmer has basically ushered in some kind of like dictatorship. It's like it's still bad. It's not that bad, but because of but I think that there's this complete kind of fake patriotism you get from liberals now, which is like, how dare they suggest that there's a free speech problem in this country when there's clearly a free speech problem in this country. Some people, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, get a bit carried away. Yeah. They don't live here. They don't know the full extent of it. Yeah. But there obviously are problems.
But they're not wrong.
We can't.
That's the thing. I mean, let's have a look at the next story we're going to look at here. Prison governor who had a fling with a drug dealer and got a free Mercedes out of it. I mean, you sort of go to yourself, has prison become a kind of representation of OnlyFans or something? There seems to be an awful lot of sex going on. Sex and drugs and rock and roll. What do you want to do? I'd like to get sent to prison, please. Why is that? Because I'd like to have sex with one of the warders and get a free car.
Seems like the way things are going. I mean, this is an incredible story. So she was found to be, this governor was found to be too close to this particular inmate. The fact that there was this £12,000 Mercedes that she received after he was released on licence. The fact that when they went to her house, they found his DNA on a toothbrush. I'll let people make up their own minds about what all that's about.
Well, at least he was feeling his teeth. Yeah. Message to all you kids out there, just keep brushing your teeth.
Keep brushing your teeth is the main takeaway.
Make sure you don't get taken to the cleaners. Anyway, go on.
It's like the last days of Rome in prisons at the moment. I don't know what's going on.
Know. It's ridiculous. We've had 2 women, sort of jailers, as it were, I mean, why have they even got women sort of looking after men in prison? Doesn't sound like a great idea. I mean, if you went to the sort of, you know, the well of common sense and you said, you know, throw a question in like, you know, like it was that, what was it, the new Elon Musk AI?
Yeah, just asking Grok. Yeah,
just ask Grok. Is it a good idea to put, you know, reasonably good-looking young women into a men's prison where they look after them? Where men it's locked in cells for sort of 20 hours of the day and haven't had sex for a long time. Do you think that's a good idea, Grok? Probably not.
Probably not. Even from just like a security point of view, it's probably better to have men as prison wardens and governors, you think, but
Call me old-fashioned.
Absolutely.
Unbelievable. One from Linda, who says, I run a small childcare business and the employer cost will simply cripple me. How do they expect to fund public sector without the private sector? I don't believe for 1 minute that Labour will cut overpaid public sector workers. I think that's the other thing. Nobody's buying this ridiculous idea of a 15% reduction in civil servants over 5 years, because actually what it is a 3% reduction every single year for 5 years, which makes up to 15%, which is nothing much more than natural wastage. So they're not really going to cut anyone, are they?
I mean, you can only hope that they are going to sort the civil service out, because it is in a complete state, which is as much about how it operates as much as how many people are working there. But I just don't think anyone trusts the government will do anything. Like, all they can do is kind of tinker and wait for the next crisis to hit them.
Exactly. They're literally just sort of holding on to they had the Ming vase strategy before. They've now got the Ming vase, only got one hand on it, because the other hand's tied behind their back by all the amazing costs that they've got.
The other one's touching Rachel Reeves for a strangely long period of time.
The other hand's on Rachel Reeves. There you go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yay! Coming up in the next hour, we're going to talk about hospitality and how damaging that's going to be. Donald McLeod's going to join us. This, of course, is Morning Glory. We'll see you after the news.
I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so we reach that level in 2027.
The answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great, great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative, because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us, because, as you know, that's right there, that's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr.
are not
President,
strong...
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. Coming up to 3 minutes past 7. The sun is up. It's a beautiful sunrise this morning. There is spring in the air. There was a spring statement yesterday, of course, in the House of Commons by Rachel Reeves, but unfortunately it hasn't been received terribly well. Almost every newspaper is calling her deluded, absolutely out of touch with reality, and quite frankly, I'm worried about her mental state. And I don't say this lightly, and I'm not making fun of her. I'm actually saying that to be this deluded, to look into the abyss and to see nothing but good things, is quite frankly some kind of mental disorder. She's first of all since she's been in charge. How's it going, Rach?
From 2% in the autumn to 1% today.
Brilliant. So it's gone down by 50%, or by 100% actually, almost. You've lost 50% of your growth from 2% to 1%. What a fantastic accolade that you can leave the office with now. Lots of people are saying that Keir Starmer is to blame. He was the one that appointed her. Do you remember? We might have to dig this out. I'm sorry to do this to you guys again, but we might have to dig out the... and she's a woman. The first female Chancellor. Women and girls will be looking up to her and going... and they'll be putting their hands on her shoulder and leave them there for a little bit too long, slightly creepy, the sort of thing that people did in the 1970s. We'll come back to that in a minute. Also, we're going to talk today about what on earth is going on with migrants in this country. Judges are going soft on deportation. We're basically going to try and deport less people and get more people coming in. Sussex University has lost a battle over free speech and trans. £585,000 is what they've had to pay out to Professor Catherine Stock because she was unfairly dismissed. But also, even more importantly, there's a story that the trans census figure back in 2021, where they said 262,000 trans people live in this country, was completely made up and complete and utter cobblers, if you'll pardon the expression. 7:05, this is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Now, one of the things that they've been crowing about, right, and Keir Starmer has been crowing, the chief crower, is reducing the number of people on the NHS waiting list. My theory on what is going on here, and I think I know that you know this as well, is that what they're doing is they're trying to remove people from the waiting list by giving them appointments, which they then cancel before the appointment happens. And I'm getting more and more messages from more and more of you out there, so keep them coming, which basically tell me that this is a thing. I think that the government are doing this deliberately. I put it to a government minister yesterday, and he kind of sidestepped it. He didn't really admit yes or no whether it was happening. But how about this? Lynn from Yorkshire says, my husband has been referred for a hip replacement. He had an appointment with a consultant on the 2nd of April. He had a letter last week cancelling it. He hasn't been given another date. This means he was given an appointment within the 18 weeks, even though it was cancelled. But he won't then be added to the waiting list. They are fiddling the numbers to make things look better than they actually are. I think this is definitely happening. You see, inside of 18 weeks, which is their target, they're basically giving you an appointment, and then with the same hand and maybe waiting a couple of days, they cancel it. And that removes you from the 18-week waiting list, gives you the opinion or the impression that you've actually got the appointment within 18 weeks, but then they don't actually give you the appointment. I think it's cynical, I think it's ghastly, and I think it's entirely in keeping with the way that this government operates, right? And I would be amazed if somebody from the government could come on here and deny that they're doing it, because I bet they can't. You know why? Because it's true. Absolutely right. Morning, Mike, says Linda. I noticed Starmer put his hand on Rachel from accounts, and it took me straight back to the 1970s, when men used to think they could touch junior members of staff, particularly women, in never mind bringing my daughter, I'll just bring my my new beau. His name's Keir. He's a really interesting guy. Right-wing Phil says, Mike, talking about NHS appointments being cancelled and patients being moved from one list to another, that has happened to my mother-in-law. She needs a hip replacement. She was assessed in late summer following months of waiting. When assessed, the consultant says he tries to get them done within 2 months. At the end of February, we chased up as we hadn't heard anything. A few days later, she was called back by NHS and recommended to switch to another consultant who is less busy. In the meantime, my mother-in-law can barely walk. It is ridiculous, and my mother-in-law, who is retired, has worked all her life and paid tax. This is the thing. The NHS is still just as bad as it always was, but they're now cooking the books, I think. Tell me I'm wrong. 8 minutes past 7. Let's talk to Donald McLeod, columnist, entrepreneur, raconteur, impresario, promoter of many things, particularly involved in the nightlife economy, nighttime economy, I should say, in Scotland. Donald, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
So,
very early good morning.
I know. Thank you very much for getting up this early to talk to me. I mean, and I'm not expecting you to answer in the positive here, but Rachel Reeves' mini-budget statement yesterday didn't hold out much hope for anybody, really, did it? What does it say to you in hospitality?
Well, you mentioned Sabrina Carpenter, and, I had to look this up. One of her hits is called Nonsense, and that's what basically, it's true, that's basically what her budget was. Yes. Absolute nonsense. Yeah. It was deeply disappointing, though, and it's very damaging, and to sectors that are already hemorrhaging jobs, and, closure rates are up, in particular pubs and nightclubs, and hospitality has been badly treated here, as we know very well, and it's so damaging, this, because we expected so much better from Labour when they came to power. She said she's a party of Labour is a party of work. Explain to me then how a 3.4 billion hit on this sector is going to create jobs and promote investment and stop closures. It's going to do the exact opposite. You mentioned about the onesie there. I was laughing there. I thought that was very funny. But, does she also wear snow mitts when she's using her abacus with bendy strings, to get the figures together? Because, there's a word in Scotland for her. It's called Egypt.
Right.
She is an idiot, and she actually makes, Liz Truss look like a mathematical genius. Yeah. I mean, you can't tax your way to growth. It's just, it just doesn't work, and this is what's going to happen.
Well, surely anybody sensible, if you were her, you'd go, right, so here's our plan. This was back in October. Our plan is to create growth, right? What we're going to do is we're going to put a load of money into the public sector, and then we're going to wait and see if it works. And having done that, the growth has gone from 2% to 1%. So you might think, well, maybe that wasn't a very good idea. Since well, let's see. What do you think? Do you think
the
maybe
Office of Budget Responsibility?
Do you think maybe
God,
before? Yeah, before we drive the bus completely off the cliff, maybe we should change course, But she doesn't seem capable.
Put the brakes on a wee bit, a wee bit, just slam them on because it's not working, and we can see it's not working. There's so many people like myself up and down the country that wanted change, wanted a bit of hope, and voted Labour. And now we're sitting there, what?
Yeah.
I mean, they sprung this one on spring. It has sprung, spring has sprung, and spring statement has sprung a leak, a massive leak on jobs, investment and closures. And, personally speaking, how, I'm in a quandary. I'm already, we're already struggling as a sector, but that's going to hit me for £250,000.
Yeah.
I
know. Is this the national insurance hike?
Yeah, then employers' NI rates going up, and over inflation increase in the living wage. Why don't they do the opposite? Do it maybe Ireland or Germany or France do, reduce the VAT as they did after. Sunak did that during the pandemic to 5%, and it went, it saved the sector. Right. Right down.
So that's, and that's something that we know works, right? So if you make something cheaper for people and you take the VAT down to 5 instead of 20, people will actually spend more money.
Yes, they'll spend. They dig into their pockets and go, and suddenly the tills fill up. People go out, they feel better themselves. Yes, there is other, tax rates going up, but at this rate, with these NI rates, what that does is the increases don't just affect me as an employer; they affect the suppliers of the industry. The people that make the beer, that make the whiskey, your staff costs. They've got huge staff costs, so it affects the whole economy, and they start losing jobs, and suddenly, you know what, you're racing into a recession. I don't get it. So, and rates relief, I mean, they cut the rates relief in England from 75% to 40%, which, has helped a lot of business. In Scotland, we just got ours this year, but they excluded half the businesses that needed it. And the other thing there is it's been worked out that the Scottish grant will reduce by up to £900 million by 2029 because of these changes. So there'll be even less money for the Scottish government to use if they indeed cared or wanted to help businesses, which in many cases they don't.
Right. And you're saying, I saw you were on ITV recently, STV I should say, in Scotland, talking about the numbers of closures that are going on in your sector in particular, nightclubs, late night sort of venues where music is played are just not being able to hack it right now.
Well, after there's more and more venues are closing. I don't have an exact number, but you can see you just need to walk down any of the streets in the cities up here, as indeed you can do around about the UK. But there's about a 37% closure rate across the country at the moment. That's the UK, and a lot of these are grassroots music venues, and they're the life and blood of the music industry. This is where all your artists generally come from, and there's some big, there's been famous names over the past that have closed, like Moles and Bath, and the 30 Note and Glasgow.
Moles is closed. I used to go. I saw the Cure in Moles and Bath.
Well, I recorded an album that was never released in Moles all these years ago.
It's a great little place.
I'll tell you why it wasn't released.
Yeah. No, but it was a great little place. But it is, I mean, you know, it's this kind of closing down of any kind of fun. And it's, you know, and you start to wonder if it's deliberate. You know, they don't want people going to pubs. They don't want people going to music venues. They don't want people enjoying themselves. They don't want people, you know, smoking. They don't want people drinking. They're a miserable, ghastly, awful crowd, aren't they?
It's the fifth largest sector in the UK employment, and yet they don't care about it. And if they don't care, you know, then it disappears, and then one day we go, oh, what happened there?
Yeah.
They just get so stuck in their politics, you know, trying to make the numbers, trying to look smart and, you know, intelligent when they're anything but. It really is a disgrace.
Yeah.
And so, you know, hopefully maybe there'll be a levy of sorts comes through from the big concerts like your Sabrina, you know, Carpenter shows, where maybe £1 a ticket will come back into the industry, whether it's through a live trust or through the music venue trust. Will feed back into the grassroots music scene. That would help save it. But I think it's government's duty to save these industries, and they are ignoring them at the moment.
Well, it's certainly their duty not to tax them out of existence, you know, because that is the problem. They must make an awful lot of money on the VAT alone from something like the Oasis tour. I mean, it was front page of the Sun yesterday. Ticketmaster in trouble for selling premium tickets at a price they shouldn't have sold them at, and they might have to give money back to some of the punters.
Really? That surprises me.
Shocking, isn't it? It's like that scene from Casablanca. I'm shocked to see gambling going on. Here's your winnings.
What?
You know, but imagine the VAT they're getting off that Oasis tour.
Massive amounts, and you know, but it does need a radical change to the VAT system. And you know, countries, as I say, like Germany and France, and you know, even Ireland can reduce it for hospitality. Why can't Britain? We're already the highest tax country. We're already the highest tax in Europe in living memory. You know, and in Scotland that's even higher because they add on another % here and there to the income tax rates up here, the Scottish government.
And,
so
and more bad news for Friends of the Garage, you know, which sits there in Sucky Hall Street in Glasgow. I'm seeing that Glasgow City Chiefs are facing fresh rat misery. And there's rats running around all over the place because they've got a new drainage system. You're going to get the super rats in the garage. What's going on?
Massive rats. No, I will dispute that. Our bit is clean and healthy and all that. But they dug up the pedestrian boulevard to replace it with a pedestrian boulevard. It was when they dug it up, they suddenly realised, oh, wait a minute, there's utilities under there. They might need replaced. And so a 6-week job has now taken 2 years. You know, the Harris fencing is still dug up. I don't know if they've planted even the new trees yet, but they put in these big, huge sort of pipes with all the cables in them, which have just become like expressways for rats, you know. That's what we're told. But then above ground, we have the Deliveroo expressways, you know, where all the Uber Eats all run the recycles all bombing up and down. Nobody else uses them, which is, you know, destroyed the sort of transport infrastructure of the city. People don't go in, they can't get parked. And if you do try and walk, you're going to get run over by one of the, you know,
I was sitting in a traffic jam in London. I was sitting in a traffic jam in London the other day because they basically narrowed the street to such an extent because they've made a bus lane, they've made a cycle lane. There was literally nobody in the cycle lane. There were no buses in the bus lane, and we were all sitting there for about 15 minutes, not moving. And you just go, "What is going on?" I mean, it's ridiculous.
You know, that's the thing. When buses are coming into, say, Sauchiehall Street, because cars sometimes, you know, imagine that as well, if I try and find a parking space,
oh God, heaven forbid,
it goes down to one lane, so the buses can't turn in. So who'd have thunk it? I mean, all these things we were saying at the time, this is what's going to happen. Oh no, what do you know about it? You know, you just want to destroy the planet, and you just want cars everywhere spewing out fumes, and you're like,
right-wing bigots.
No, idiots, you know.
I know. It's mad, isn't it?
That's where we are with that.
It is. It's just driving everybody insane. Well, listen, we live to fight another day, Donald. Good to see you. Hopefully see you soon down here in the big smoke in London. Donald McLeod, columnist there up in Scotland, entrepreneur, bar owner, restaurant owner, a man who's built so many businesses in the time. I mean, I've known this man over 20 years. And, you know, he's built businesses, he's employed people, he's made massive amounts of money for the state, he's given massive amounts of tax to them. And they're basically trying to strangle everything that he does and everything that every other entrepreneur does in this country. It's quite shocking. Mike, who voted for the OBR to run the country, says Tony. Good question. And Massimo from Great Bowden says, always love your show. Rate the NHS. I've been waiting for a urology appointment for over a year. It's been cancelled and rescheduled 4 times, and it's now on April the 1st. I'm not sure if it's going to go ahead or if it's an April Fool's, as it's now becoming a joke. Absolutely right. Incredible. Let's get a voice note from Phil.
Good morning, Mike. Phil from Nottingham, still in Scotland, still earning money for Rachel Reeves. At this point, I'd suggest it's not the OBR we need, it's Obi-Wan Kenobi, because, my God, we're in a pickle.
Yeah, there is a disturbance in the force, I think you'll find. And poor old Rachel Reeves doesn't really know what the answer is, does she? And that is the problem. We've basically got a broken government, a broken economy, a broken country. Who's going to sort it out? Please, somebody tell me. 20 minutes past 7. This is Morning Glory. Coming up, Anne McElvoy is going to be here to talk us through what she thinks of the economic statement yesterday. And we'll also talk to Dr. Patrick Bury about what's going on with NATO and Ukraine. This is Talk.
I mean, that's not what we've seen. We've seen that access to PIP and these PIP benefits are going to be cut. And this, I just want to say that this affects us all. 1 in 10 people of a working age are receiving sickness or disability benefits. And this is because most of us are going to experience disability in our lifeline. Disabled people are part of the fabric of our society. We all know someone who experiences mental illness, has a chronic condition, a terminal illness, and that's the reality.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. This, of course, is the home of common sense, the one place to be for the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. We're looking at some very interesting text coming in on the basis of these waiting lists and the NHS giving appointments out and then cancelling them at the last minute. Andy says this, morning, Mike, it's happened to me 3 times in 15 months. I've been waiting to have my ears cleaned out. It's a joke. All the best. One from Andy says, Mike, I had an MRI scan on the 30th of January. I can't get results. They say it's going to be 18 to 20 weeks. And Mike, I think we've read that one out already. Lynn from Yorkshire says, my husband's been referred for a hip replacement. He had an appointment with a consultant on the 2nd of April. He had a letter last week cancelling it. He hasn't been given another date. This means he was given an appointment within the 18 weeks, even though it was cancelled. But he won't then be added to the waiting list. They are fiddling the numbers to make sure things look better than they actually are. I think there's something going on here, and I'm very interested in any stories that you can send me, any kind of evidence that we can gather together, and we can put it to the NHS and actually ask them. I did ask yesterday to Luke Pollard, the Defence Minister, whether this was a thing, and he was a bit woolly about it, to be honest. It's not really very clear whether the government would do such a thing, but in my view, it's the kind of thing they would do to make themselves look better, because it's all about targets. Let's talk to Anne McElvoy, host of the podcast Power Play, head of podcasting at Politico, formerly of The Economist and many other places as well. Anne, very good morning to you.
Good to see you.
Interesting yesterday that there doesn't seem to be very many people holding out any hope for this particular budget from Rachel Reeves. I mean, even the Mirror and the Guardian seems to have turned on her as well.
Yeah, she's getting it from both sides, isn't she, Mike? In the sense, I was just looking through the response this morning, and this, I think, goes inside the Labour Party as well, that you've got some people who are just so shocked by those benefit changes and the swinging cuts and by the government's own impact assessment that it is going to have some really harsh effects on families, and as much as you can say, well, this is intended to get a lot of people back into work, that takes a long time, and there are some people who simply won't be able to get back into work. It's going to have real impact. So that's very uncomfortable for the Labour Party there, remembering that it has a proud legacy, as it would see it, from particularly under Gordon Brown as Chancellor, trying to bring down family and child poverty. At the same time, she's got the press a bit more on the right saying, well, hang on, this looks like we might have to raise taxes again, particularly if those tariffs threatened by Donald Trump on cars and car imports to the US come in next week. And when Donald Trump at the moment says something is going to happen, most likely it happens. We might get some relief, but we're unlikely to get a free pass on that. So in a sense, she's getting a pincer movement, isn't she, from the left and the right, and also a lot of people in the middle just saying, well, what does this mean for me? I'm quite confused, but it doesn't seem to be a good portent for us.
No, there doesn't seem to be anybody who's looking forward to whatever is going to be the result of what she said yesterday. Let's have a look at what she did say about housing, saying that was going to somehow add value to the economy.
We published changes to the National Planning Policy Framework, driven forward tirelessly by my right honourable friend, the Deputy Prime Minister. Reintroducing mandatory housing targets and bringing grey belt land into scope. The OBR have today concluded that these reforms will permanently increase the level of real GDP by 0.2% in 29-30, an additional £6.8 billion for our economy.
Did she say 0.2%? I think she did. I mean, it's not a lot, is it? I mean, the fact is that people in the business of house building have actually said, well, we haven't got the people to build the houses, so the houses are not going to be built. And so much of what she said about the recovery of the economy is so far in the future that it's mostly into a second term, if indeed they get one.
Yes, I mean, I'm going to put in a word for the idea for Rachel Reeves and where this would go. I mean, just in raw politics, is on the figures that we've seen, the slight upward lift. We might do better from the autumn onwards. Now, nobody can book themselves, a splashy holiday off the back of how much richer they're going to feel from September onwards, unless you're already rich. But you could see a sort of corridor to success for Labour, in which it says, well, now we can show that we are, things are moving upwards in terms of inflation, the economy, the nuts and bolts, and what's the answer? Who else has got another answer? So that would be what she would say about that. On the house building, yes, she's going to have difficulty with that, but again, she wants to show she is, as she put it, within touching distance of her target. In fact, she's off her target, right? But she will make the case that in order to get house building going, you may not have people to build the houses, but unless you've got the planners, the planning decisions made. You notice that she spoke warmly there about Angela Rayner tirelessly and all of that, is that basically there is a perception, there's a bit of tension between the two of them about how Angela Rayner is certainly, I would say, many things a bit to the left of Rachel Reeves, that they need to stay glued together to show that they're marching in a direction. It's not that they can deliver before the next election, but that they have a sense of forward momentum. That's what I think this will be fought on.
But I'm hearing an awful lot of noises coming from within the Labour government of displeasure, shall we say, with two people. One is Rachel Reeves, the other one is Ed Miliband. And I can imagine Angela Rayner, I don't know her terribly well, but I can imagine she's sitting there smiling because she's not in the firing line. She's going, well, look at the mess she's making. Look at the terrible state that she's in. I'm just sitting here saying I want to build some more houses, but she's telling me I can't. You know, so she's winning here, isn't she?
She's winning at the moment. She has her ups and downs. I mean, the spotlight shines differently and harshly on different ministers at different times. I think for Angela Rayner, we haven't really got to the bit yet. I've actually seen a bit of it in my. I spent a lot of time in part of Kent around Faversham, where Angela Rayner overruled any attempt to do local objections to a massive house building plan that is going to materially affect that part of Kent. There's great sort of, some people are very keen on it and some people really, really are not. So I don't think we've seen the end of Angela Rayner is going to have to go out there and defend why she is going to ride pretty roughshod over so-called NIMBY concerns. A lot of NIMBYs say, well, I'm not being a NIMBY. I just like the place that I live in, and I don't really fancy, a huge amount of infrastructure at the bottom of my garden, thank you very much. So I don't think Angela Rayner is yet out of the woods, but you're absolutely right. It was Rachel Reeves who was in the firing line today. Angela Rayner, as you saw, looked quite serene, I thought, and she had the Chancellor saying nice things about her. What's not to like?
Yeah, right. And then finally, the Joseph Rowntree Foundation is the basic kind of reason why the Mirror and the Guardian have gone for Rachel Reeves, because it's the Joseph Rowntree Foundation who have said there's going to be 250,000 people driven into poverty, including 50,000 children. I mean, as that starts to wear in and that starts to have an effect, there's going to be an awful lot, presumably, of Labour MPs who are going to feel very uncomfortable about that, aren't they?
Yes, it's also there actually in the government's own figures. Joseph Rowntree, you could say, is a poverty campaign organisation. It's going to shine, it's going to go for that message. But actually looking through the impact assessment that the government has published, it says something pretty similar. Yes, a lot of Labour people are absolutely furious about that. The question is, that tends to be at the moment more on the left of the party. Does it, as it kicks in and as MPs feel more and more uncomfortable about it and what they're hearing around them in their constituencies, does that rebellion move more to the centre ground? A lot, I think, really depends on that. Rachel Reeves, the government, Keir Starmer, effectively would be saying, well, if we could get a lot more people into work, that would help the economy, it would get this growth going, which seems so sluggish and difficult for the UK. But it's a longer road to do that. It seems unlikely that you could do that in any way before the really bad effects of these things kick in. I would say, the Conservatives are going to oppose this, or Reform going to say, well, no, we don't want to do this. We want to keep spending the money on benefits, are they? I mean, so I think everybody is facing the same problems, but it's the Labour government that, if you like, is left holding this particular baby.
Yeah, and the baby's not looking good. And good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Anne McElvoy hosted the podcast Power Play, head of podcasting at Politico. How about this from Andy? He says, morning, Mike. Outside number 11 Downing Street, there's a sign that reads, beware, thieves operate in this area. Great show. That's Andy in Rugby. And Mark says this, James in Spain says this, Mike, the reason the NHS are giving out appointments and then cancelling is because they can fudge the statistics in favour of waiting lists coming down. But then the statistics will not include the cancellations. It's all smoke and mirrors. I'm convinced that that's absolutely what's going on. And a great one from Tony in Sussex as well, who says his wife works for the NHS as a medical secretary. He's going to get some information from her and he's going to get back to us. And he says she's a big fan of yours as well. Take care. Tony, thank you very much indeed. Give your wife my best. And if you can get any information to us about why these cancellations are happening and whether there is an absolute policy, because I'm convinced that there is, of government waiting list being, NHS waiting list being brought down because government officials have told people in the NHS, make a load of appointments, even if you can't handle the actual rush on the number of appointments, and then cancel them, and that will move people off the waiting list, and it'll look as though we've somehow started cutting the waiting list down. I think that's what's going on. It's a con job like everything else. Let's get a voice note from Carl and Daryl.
Morning, Mike. Carl from Liverpool. Great show, thanks. Just to tell you, I was diagnosed or will be diagnosed with retinal pigmentosa in Liverpool, and I got an appointment which is the 26th of March. 2026. Great show, as I said. Take care. Bye.
Hi, Mike. Darryl from Blackburn. Just ringing to say about the NHS. I've been waiting 9 months now for my appointment. In January, they send you a text asking you to go to a leak, asking you if you want to cancel it. So they are fiddling the numbers.
This is fascinating. I'm sure this is going on. You know, I've got a sense about some of these things. You know, you have an instinct when you do what I do, and there's definitely something smelly about what is happening. There are many, many more people out there, and I know who you are. Please let us know who you are and let us know what your situation is, who are getting given appointments and then having those appointments taken away, literally within the same week. But don't worry, because it moves you off the waiting list. And then they can say, oh, yeah, we've started to... Because this government can't be trusted, I promise you that. There is one thing that I know that this government does, and that is tell lies. So there is nothing that they do which should not be questioned. There is nothing that they do which should be taken for granted. There is nothing that they do that should be believed until they can actually prove it to you and sit you down and prove that they are telling the truth. Because, quite frankly, they are a bunch of liars, and they wouldn't know the truth if it fell over them. 0344 499 1000 is the number. Here's one from Keith who says, Mike, Keith in sunny Blackpool, top show as always. Some breaking news. Starmer did the touchy-feely with Trump when he bore him the King's letter. Yeah, I know. Well, we might find that piece of that clip, although people are saying to me that if you're watching on TV right now, you basically see all the time. Well, there it is now. Put his hand on there. We didn't count it that time. We'll have to try it again. 5, 4, 3, there we go, 5, 4, 3, 2. I didn't quite make it to 1. He made it to 2. So it's like a 4-second thing. Apparently, if you're watching on television, when we go to an ad break, you see it played over and over again. People are already saying they see it plenty. Well, listen, you can't see it enough times. It's cringy. And if you put your hand on a woman at work and held it there on her shoulder for 5 seconds, do you not think you'd be hauled before the beak and you'd be hauled before HR and be told, you can't do that? There he is with Rachel. He's got his hand on her shoulder. He's holding it there for longer than he held it on Trump. It looks creepy. It looks weird. It looks wrong. He shouldn't do it. This is Morning Glory.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. It's 7:38 with you all the way through into us until 10 o'clock. 4 glorious hours of Morning Glory, and we will be with you all the way up until that moment when Julie Hartley-Brewer takes over. Morning, Mike. Says Tracy in Worcester. My husband came home from work yesterday and said he'd heard on the radio there had been around 100 protesters within Gaza demonstrating against Hamas. Is this true? It could be the start of something positive for the region. It is true, actually, Tracy. We're going to be talking about it, if not today, certainly tomorrow, because there is definitely a burgeoning and growing number number of people, Palestinians in Gaza, who have realised and worked out that actually the problem for them is Hamas running the place, and Hamas causing all of the difficulties with Israel and the terrorist activities that they get involved in, the taking of the hostages and the complete ruination of Gaza's mainstream economy, because they spent every single penny that they've been given in aid on building this network of tunnels. And that's why there's a problem. And it's kind of ironic, isn't it? Somebody pointed this out on Twitter yesterday, but in the Western world, in universities around America and in Britain, of course, we get people marching on behalf of Hamas, which is rather shocking, isn't it, when you consider it. Bill in Fleet says, my daughter's been on the list for her tonsils to be removed since 2019. Then this year they contacted her to ask if she still wanted them out, and then the following week she contacted them to find she'd been removed from the waiting list. It's very odd, this. Something definitely going on here. Let's get a voice note from Steve.
Hey, Mike. Steve from Yorkshire. I didn't think that there was anybody else who thought that Starmer was such a pleb more than me, but you take the award, mate. You're absolutely right, 100%. The blokes are 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yay!
It's never going to be forgotten, is it? It's so awful, that. Absolutely dreadful. Typical Labour economics, says Martin. My bills are up £200 per month, not including food, but according to Keir Stroker, I'm going to be £500 better off. Yay! I mean, where does he get it from? This tweet that he put out earlier, where he's talking about NHS waiting list being cut, you know, people being £500 better off. It's all fantasy, pie in the sky, or to those of us who speak the normal lingo of actually English, it's all lies. It's all complete and utter lies. Let's talk to Neil, who's in Buckinghamshire. Hello, Neil.
Hello, Mike. How you doing?
Yeah,
all right?
very well, sir. What can you tell me?
Well, I work for a big water company, and we had a new manager come in, and we do planned maintenance.
Right.
And we had a big backlog. It looked really, really bad. So what he said was, right, what we need you to do is close all the jobs down,
right,
raise a planned follow-up job, which creates the new job,
yeah,
which means they get rid of the backlog. Click of a switch.
Right.
That was how it's done.
So the backlog disappears. That's, I mean, I'll tell you what, this is what the government's doing in all sorts of ways. This is exactly what they're doing with the asylum seekers, right? Because they know they've got, I mean, before the end of December, they had 120,000 people waiting for an asylum processing scenario, and now they've got it down to something like 10,000, because they've basically just granted them all asylum.
Exactly. They just you can't trust this government. You can't trust the Speaker. He does not make Starmer answer one question.
No.
PMQs are a joke.
Yeah, they really are. And this government's a joke. They don't answer any questions, and everything they say is a complete and utter falsehood. Neil, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Karen from North West London says, I understand that if I put my arm on Richard III for 5 seconds, I would ask if Donald J. Trump put his hand on a woman for 4 seconds, would he not be called out? Oh, yeah, all the usual lefties would be calling me a rapist, you know, an abuser of women. Absolutely unbelievable. John in Maidstone says, Mike, I'm amazed at what this Labour government are being allowed to get away with. Where is the opposition? Well, you might ask that question. We had Kemi Badenoch in here the other day, and I said to her, you know, you're being accused quite often of not really being hard enough on Keir Starmer when we have Prime Minister's questions. And yesterday was another example where, you know, she didn't really land a glove on him. And Keir Starmer is in such a bad place right now that you would think it would be simple to drive a coach and horses through any kind of answer that he gave. Kemi Badenoch's answer was that, you know, the reason that I can't get a straight answer out of Keir Starmer is that basically he doesn't have an answer for anything. And so he obfuscates and he doesn't give facts because he doesn't actually know the answers. And that may be all well and good, and it may even be true. But surely the Conservative leader of the opposition should have a better way of making Keir Starmer look ridiculous, because they should put him on the spot. Let's have a look at how she explained how that works.
No one can make him answer, but he doesn't answer questions because he doesn't know. He genuinely doesn't know. I thought he was obfuscating because he didn't want to say the truth, and a lot of the times he actually says things that aren't true, but he doesn't have answers. He didn't have a plan, and so he just keeps repeating the same words. We play Starmer bingo in the office now because we know he's going to say certain things, 22 billion, 14 years, but he's got no answers and no vision for the future.
He certainly has no vision for the future. We were playing Starmer bingo yesterday, as we were Rachel Reeves bingo. I suggested that she would mention the £22 billion black hole in the first 2 minutes of her speech. It turned out it was in the first 8 minutes of her speech, so I didn't quite get that one right. But we're talking about a great many things this morning, including, of course, the state of play in crime. and punishment in this country, because there's a story that's going on about a guy who stole £15,000 worth of handbags from Harrods, right? He was an actual Harrods worker, and he took those bags, many of them from a very, very well-known and expensive designer called Bottega Veneta. He took them while he was a stock controller between November and July of last year. He's 29 years old. He used to work for Fendi. He sold the bags on for £5,000, thereby profiting from his crime. But when he went before a judge, the judge said clearly he was suffering because he didn't make enough money. She said he was struggling to make ends meet when he carried out the offences, and so therefore it wasn't right to send him to prison because, after all, he was in a bad way. No question of whether the £5,000 gets returned, no question of whether the people who suffered at the hands of his theft, i.e. Harrods and the designer company themselves, get any retribution. He just gets a suspended sentence. And so what does that tell you about shoplifting? What it tells you is that if you shoplift, you will not be punished. This from Elliot. He said, last Friday I watched a family get caught for shoplifting in Wilkinson's, coach stuffed and the pram filled with stolen goods as well. Not a single person was arrested. We now live in a country where crime does pay. Why am I bothering to pay for my shopping anymore? Well, you do wonder, don't you? You know, as you wander into your local supermarket and you push your trolley around and you fill it up with ever-increasing amounts of food and goods and maybe, you know, cleaning products and drink, all of which are going up at at a rate of sort of, 10% a year, if not more. Things that, people don't really notice, but things that used to cost, say, 40p now cost 60p. That's a 50% increase. And people who can't afford that can't afford it. It's as simple as that. And instead what's happening is that people who can't be bothered paying are simply walking off with stuff. And you're the mug because you're the one that's paying. Ridiculous. Let's get a voice note from Belinda.
Morning, Mike. Belinda here. I've got a story for you about the NHS. I've had lower back pain for a long, long time, but it got so bad last year. I went to see a physio in August. He sent me off for an MRI scan in October. They then referred me to a doctor in a private hospital because there were no NHS appointments. I was outsourced. He then sent me to neurology. Neurology have then referred me to a different team within their neurology department, the triage part, and now I've been bounced back to my GP 9 months later, and I'm still no further forward. So what the hell is going on? Great show, Mike.
Unbelievable. Belinda, thanks for your story. This is a more and more sort of recurring tale where you get into the system of the NHS and you sort of go round and round it like somebody inside a washing machine, tumble dryer, and at the end of it you get out of the tumble dryer and you're just dizzy, but nobody's actually seen you. You've just gone, oh, well, I've been to 7 different places. I've seen about 8 different doctors, a couple of nurses. They've made appointments. Some of them have been cancelled. I've been told to come in and bring a sample with me. They've lost it. I've had to do another one. I mean, it's just chaos, isn't it? Complete and utter chaos. We need your stories on the NHS. I'm convinced that there's something rotten in the state of Denmark, and I don't mean in Denmark, I mean at the NHS. I mean the government is telling the NHS to give people appointments and then cancel them the next day because that will get them off the waiting list. Luckily, we got Roy Lilly coming up next. We'll talk to him about it. We'll see what he's got to say. He's a very sensible man. He doesn't always agree with me either, so he might tell me I'm talking absolute rubbish. But I think I'm onto something here. This is Talk.
Did the Tories do anything to make it better?
We delivered Brexit and gave ourselves the opportunity. Let's not forget that.
Because that, for you, I mean, you and me, I think that is the starting point. Brexit wasn't a moment in the in time.
It's the kind of gate you've got to go through to do a lot of things that you don't have the power
What was stopping? I don't understand. What was about being in the EU was stopping us delivering growth?
We couldn't change deregulate employment law. It's difficult to change environment and planning law. You know, the restrictions on VAT. There are all kinds of things that just kind of tie your hands.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. It's 10 minutes to 8 and we are here on what looks like a rather nice day. It's kind of spring-like, it's sunny, the weather is definitely improving, which means only one thing, of course, there's going to be more and more people coming over the channel on small boats. You know, happy Thursday, I should say, actually, is the day today. We're probably going to reach, what, by the end of March, another sort of 5,000 people will have come from parts of northern France, all, of course, putting extra pressure on every single service that we have in this country, including the NHS. Let's talk now, though, to Roy Lilly, who's here, of course, because he is a man that knows a thing or two about it. Roy, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
Good to talk to you. I've got a theory, and I'm going to run it past you. The Labour government are telling us that they've cut back on the waiting list, right? But I'm hearing more and more anecdotal information from people who are saying, funnily enough, in the last sort of few months, I've been waiting for 6 months or maybe 9 months for an appointment to get myself sorted. They've given me one, and then literally 3 days later, they've cancelled it. I'm wondering if there's something amiss here and that they're actually taking people off lists because they're offering them appointments and then just cancelling them and then putting them on a sort of a further list, which means they haven't waited more than 18 weeks.
Well, Mike, no, that's not quite right. If the NHS cancels your appointment, what we call in the NHS, the clock doesn't stop. The clock keeps ticking. If a patient stops the clock by saying I can't make the appointment or I don't want the appointment, then the clock stops and then that changes the numbers. So if the NHS does it, it doesn't change the numbers. There's no benefit to them to do it. The benefit to them is to crack people through the system as quickly as possible. The numbers in absolute terms are actually starting to come down. The delays have been really what we laughingly call the winter crisis, which actually started last autumn. And here we are now in the spring. And I was looking at the numbers yesterday. Hospitals are still chock-a-block with people who've got what we might call winter problems, you know, COPD, and there's COVID is still running riot in some places, the no check. So you know, all of those sort of winter things are still bunging up the hospitals because the difficulty is they impact frail elderly people mainly. And you can't send them home unless you can send them home safely. That means social care, and we know the problems with social care.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? There's still that problem still hasn't been solved. So as long as those people are still holding the space in the beds, you know, the bed blockers, if you like, it's not a very good word, but it's a word. You know, nothing's really changed. I'm just slightly suspicious of a government that suddenly says, you know, we are making progress where nobody else did. And I like to look into these things, and all I know is an awful lot of people are telling me that they're given appointments and then they're getting them cancelled.
Yeah, look, it's a good question to ask, and whatever is happening to waiting lists at the moment, it's got nothing to do with this government. I mean, it takes a long time to turn the NHS around. You know, the old story of, you know, if you want to turn a fuel tanker into Southampton docks, you've got to turn right at Bilbao. It's a bit like that. Everything takes a long time. So what is happening at the NHS now, it's got nothing to do with anything that Wes Streeting has done. This is just the natural progression. The numbers blocking up the NHS will come down, the throughput will improve. And the throughput actually can be quite quick, because about 60% of people on NHS waiting lists are waiting for a diagnostic.
Yeah.
And of the 60%, only 20% will need a period of inpatient care. I mean, the others might need outpatient care or day case or what have you. But, that solid lump comes down quite quickly if the NHS gets a free run at it. And because it's not had it, it's had, had the strikes. We've all forgotten the chaos they caused.
I haven't forgotten.
Yeah, well, then, I'm not standing on freezing picket lines interviewing doctors is not my favourite occupation. But
well, don't worry, you won't find any doctors on the picket lines. The picket lines are always full of people who are not doctors picketing on their behalf, because the doctors are all busy working in the private sector. But how about this, right? This is from Steve. Mike, I've been on an NHS waiting list to see a cardiologist in June of last year. Every 3 months I get an important email from the NHS with a link to a survey I have to complete in order to stay on that waiting list. The survey has only one question: do I still require my appointment? By not responding or replying no, the waiting list gets shorter. How many others who don't even see this email are wrongly removed from the queue in the name of bringing down waiting lists? That's a possibility as well, isn't it?
Yeah, that does happen. That's called validating waiting lists. The NHS has to validate waiting lists.
Yeah.
That's a requirement of the Department of Health.
Yeah.
And so, validation...
Because there will be no doubt people who have died waiting for an NHS appointment, and you might as well knock them off the list. The other one that I wanted to ask you about, Roy, was this is another thing that came across my desk a couple of weeks ago, is there was a doctor who was speaking on social media. He gave an interview to somebody, I can't remember who, talking about how, he can't get a job in Britain. He's a qualified NHS doctor. He's gone through all the training, but there are no vacancies. And that seems to me to be a bizarre kind of twist in the tale, where we keep saying we haven't got enough doctors, we haven't got enough nurses, but apparently there are no vacancies.
Yeah, that issue is predominantly in primary care, where the GPs were given a bundle of money to improve their performance by recruiting allied health professionals. So that's like physiotherapists and pharmacists and people like that. They couldn't use the money to employ doctors. That rule has now recently been changed, and so the situation will improve. But it is true, we've got a supply of doctors that we can't find placements for. It's particularly true of younger doctors coming out of training as well. It seems bonkers to me that we've got huge waiting lists and all the rest of it, and we've got doctors that I've heard a story the other day of a doctor who was an Uber driver, driving a cab in London.
Yeah, it's insane, isn't it?
Yes, it is. There's a lot of complexities in how the allocations model is about the funding. And, of course, the other issue is when doctors come out of their primary training and then they need to go to a hospital for training. Yes. That's where the real bottleneck occurs, because that's where the funding is limited by the government. So people go through university, the part of their training. When they get to do the practical training in hospitals, the number of placements is decided by government and not the NHS, and that's where they keep their handle on the tap.
Yeah, interesting, because Wes Streeting is basically saying that we need more doctors. We need to stop plundering doctors from other countries. You need to train more. But if he wants to train more doctors, surely he's going to have to make it possible for them to have jobs at the end of it.
Yes, by changing the placements. And you're right. There's a thing called the Red List, which is published by the World Health Organization, a whole list of countries that you're not supposed to recruit from. But we've been getting around it. There's two ways to get around it. One, if the individual in the Red List country wants to come and work here, we can't say no if they're suitably qualified. So there are people who are encouraged to apply of their own volition and not through a formal channel. And the other thing is, what a lot of hospitals are doing, and they did it in Nepal, where a lot of nurses were recruited, and they haven't got the nurses themselves. There was a big row in Nepal about it, but they were saying, well, come to the NHS and we will give you enhanced training. So if they come over for training, then they're not recruited in the normal way, and you can get around the Red List. So, but they've been doing it because they've been so desperate for nurses. And I just read this morning in the good old British Journal of Nursing, which is
God bless you.
my regular reading, and there's an article in there that's talking about how the number of people applying to become nurses has dropped off alarmingly. And I've been around the NHS for a long time, not quite since when Florence Nightingale was a nurse, but very nearly. And the first time I've seen the number of applications to become a nurse dropping off, and that's really quite worrying.
Yeah, absolutely right. Roy, great to speak to you. Thanks very much indeed. Roy Lilly, former NHS Trust Chairman, giving us a view there from the NHS from the inside. And yeah, he says if you are cancelled by the NHS appointment system, you stay on the appointments list. Well, that may well be. But do you get moved to another list is the point? Do you get then required and then sort of calibrated, if you like, so that you haven't waited 18 weeks anymore, you've only waited 1 week? I don't know. It's just a question. I want more of your stories. Coming up, Peter Hitchens is going to be talking to us. I've got loads of great messages from you. Send us a voice note, 0344 499 1000. This, of course, is the day after the black economy was revealed by Rachel Reeves. What a nightmare.
I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so we reach that level in 2027.
The answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great, great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative, because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us, because as you know, that's right there, that's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 8. The sun is up, the sky's blue. It's going to be a nice day out there, actually. Spring is definitely in the air. And the clock's changed at the weekend, which is always a good sign. It means it's going to be lighter for longer, as well, you know. Peter Hitchens is coming up. He always likes to talk about the changing of the clocks, because he doesn't think it should happen. We might get a bit on that from him. Also, we'll get his view of Rachel Reeves' rather ridiculous budget statement yesterday, in which she revealed that we're going to become a defence superpower, apparently. She thinks that by standing in front of a tank in a high-vis vest, that is going to change everybody's mind and make her the Iron Chancellor. Well, it ain't working, I'm afraid. She decided to turn up for work yesterday in a onesie. I'm not quite sure what she was doing. I don't know. People will say, Why are you attacking her for being a woman and the way she dresses? Well, I'm not. People attacked Volodymyr Zelensky for not wearing a suit when he went to the White House. Nobody said, oh, that's anti-male. The fact is that she's on the world stage. She's about to make a big statement about not only her own economic prospects, but the government's economic prospects, and therefore Britain's economic prospects. I just thought she might have put on something that was a bit more than a jumpsuit, to be honest. I mean, it's the sort of thing people wear to get on an EasyJet flight to Turkey to get their teeth done. Sorry, call me old-fashioned. 0344 499 1000. Front page of The Sun this morning, we haven't mentioned that. They've gone a different way. They haven't gone with the budget. They've gone a little bit on the budget. Growing pains for Reeves hit home. But Prince of Wales, they got. The Prince of Wales is apparently going to appear in Clarkson's farm after meeting the show's Caleb Cooper yesterday. And Jeremy Clarkson said, now I know where he was all day, I'll let him off for skiving. Apparently he was meeting the future king. Well, there you are. There you have it. We're going to be talking about a great many things. Apparently the census in 2021, in which we were told that there were hundreds of thousands of trans people living in this country, was completely made up and wrong. And it turns out that you cannot now trust the Office for National Statistics, and they've admitted that you shouldn't use that number, 229,000, as any sort of guide whatsoever. They haven't given us an alternative guide to the number, but all we know is that it's certainly not as big as we thought. Judges going soft on deportation, we'll talk about that as well. And what about the OBR, the Office for Budget Responsibility, created by one man, and that was, of course, the Chancellor to David Cameron, George Osborne. We're going to be talking to a man that was one of his aides earlier on in the life of this government. Rupert Harrison's going to join us. We'll find out from him. What's the point of the OBR? They seem to get everything wrong, and nobody seems to care what they say anymore. So we want to hear from you as well about the NHS. We think, and I think, I'm pretty sure about this, that there's something crooked going on with NHS waiting lists. They're giving people appointments and then cancelling them, thereby moving them out of the 18-week waiting list into another waiting list, which gives them another 18 weeks. 0344 499 1000 is the number. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Let's get a voice note on Rachel Reeves. Here is Kieran.
Morning, Mike. Just on my way to work. Some people do in this country, and hopefully some of the wealth that's created by my business goes towards people who don't want to work, and it can contribute to their tracksuits and their scooters. That's the dream. But it's all by design, decimation of the hospitality industry, because they don't want people meeting up anymore. They don't want people to discuss how miserable this government have turned out to be and how rubbish Camouflage Keith and Cash Point Rach are. They're abysmal. And I think it's going to come to an end for them very shortly. Mike, you're a legend. It is the best radio show. And all the best, mate.
You're very kind, Kieran. Thank you very much indeed. It would be nice to think that it's all going to come to an end soon. I was sure back end of last year that Keir Starmer couldn't last because the government of this country couldn't be so bad and carry on being that bad. I also thought that the Labour Party people and Labour MPs would force him out for being useless. Since then, he's got more useless, but they haven't forced him out. And meanwhile, we've now got Rachel Reeves, who actually had the gall to appear in front of a tank the other day wearing a high-vis vest. When we spoke to Luke Pollard yesterday, who's the Defence Minister, I pointed out to him that if Rachel Reeves does decide to go to Ukraine, which is a war zone, she best not wear a high-vis jacket, because that would probably make her a bit of a target for the snipers. Let's talk to Peter Hitchens, columnist of the Mail on Sunday. Very good morning to you, Peter.
Good morning.
And it seems to me
before
that...
we go anywhere else, could I take up something that your last guest, who knew an awful lot about the National Health Service, said, because I think it's very important. He said that there's a grave problem with the recruitment of nurses. And I have a suspicion that this has something to do with the conviction of Lucy Letby for a large number of murders, which it's very doubtful whether she committed. And I think many people looking at the career of nursing, seeing what has happened to her, might hesitate to take on a career where they might suddenly find themselves marched off to prison to die in jail because of failures in hospitals. And I wouldn't be at all surprised. And one hears a lot of talk among nurses who are very afraid of being stitched up in that way. I wouldn't be at all surprised if that case hasn't badly affected recruitment of nurses.
Yeah, it's an interesting
I think it's one of the many reasons why we have to get it as quickly as possible before the Criminal Cases Review Commission and back into the appeal court so that it can be looked at seriously. I think the people notice this sort of thing and it changes their behaviour, and it's part of our crisis now. It's very, very big. It's not just a case of one woman. It affects the entire National Health Service.
Yeah, because the other thing that's interesting is as a sort of aside to what is the main Lucy Letby story, is that the figures coming out of a lot of maternity wards now are pretty awful. When you see the survival rates of babies born who don't survive, and the malpractice that goes on, and I don't call it malpractice by accident. Some of it's not deliberate. Some of it is just, you know, bad practice and sort of I don't know, negligence. But there's an awful lot of mistakes being made in maternity wards in this country.
There is. It's terrible. And every time I hear of in my own life of people going into maternity hospitals, you worry. I mean, there are some hospitals where things are still competently managed, but there are, I'm afraid, some where they just don't seem to be. There's something in the levels of training seems to have gone seriously wrong. The idea we used to have that the health service would get better and better as the drugs got better, the treatments got better, the skills got better. I have a strong sense that this is going into reverse. And the first place you see this is maternity, where healthy people, young healthy people, go into hospital and experience what is coming to us all when we get old. That is to say, a lower level of care and competence than used to exist. It's very, very worrying, and it's part of the crisis. I was standing waiting for a train on a platform yesterday, and past me went a goods train with painted on it in huge blue and white letters, "Thank you, NHS." I thought to myself, what has become of this country where we're supposed to applaud a public service for which we pay a huge amount in taxes as if it was some kind of religious experience? It's absolutely not. It needs to be treated with a good deal more scepticism, as does an awful lot more of politics.
Yeah, absolutely right. Well, I mean, I actually thought of you, funnily enough, and you may think that's a bit weird, when I saw the picture of Rachel Reeves yesterday in front of a tank, because, you know, we've talked before about the nonsensical kind of spin that politicians try to put on, and they love nothing more when they're in a desperate place than to stand in front of some kind of military hardware. And as I say, I did point out to the Defence Minister, who amazingly came on the show, only the second time we've actually had a Cabinet Minister on.
Well, congratulations.
I mean, they must be getting really desperate to talk to me. But I said, by the way, if Rachel does go to Ukraine, you know, please tell her not to wear the high-vis jacket. Because, I mean, only politicians would think they have to wear a high-vis jacket in a military situation.
It is striking, isn't it, that we now have a generation of politicians who are incredibly enthusiastic about war.
Yeah.
But who are also probably the least experienced in it.
Yes.
After 1945, very large numbers of members of Parliament and people in public life had actually served in combat and knew what it looked like.
Yeah.
I've always pointed out that the only major world leader who'd served in actual combat, I mean, wounded in combat during the Iraq crisis of 2003, was Jacques Chirac.
Yeah.
And he was against the intervention. And this is a man, I say, who'd actually been wounded in Algeria and knew what war looked like.
Yeah.
These people know.
Well, it's bloody awful, isn't it? That's the thing. I mean, it's awful.
Well, it's a terrible thing. But the thing is, that it's not just that. Somehow or other, we seem to have got into a cycle where politicians fall in love with war and propel us into it. What we have now, and everybody now accepts, that in 2003 we were conned on a large scale by our rulers about non-existent weapons of mass destruction. The supposed fascist menace to the world, Saddam Hussein. He was a bad man, and his country was not particularly pleasant to live in. But he wasn't actually a major threat to us, and the excuses cobbled up for that illegal and disastrous invasion were eventually exploded. And everybody knows that now. Yeah. But what the governments of the Western world seem to have learned from that is not to stop engaging in stupid wars, but to get better at making propaganda for them. And I would say that the current frenzy, the pretense that Vladimir Putin, whose economy is smaller than Italy's, I should point out, is going to roll his tanks to Vienna, Warsaw, Berlin, and eventually to Dunkirk, and stare at us across the Channel menacingly. It's as much bilge as the WMD stuff was, and yet people are actually believing it, and as a result, we're plunging into a state of war-mindedness, which may actually lead us into a European war. And I'd like to make one other small point about this. People all think that nuclear war is unimaginable, and it jolly well ought to be. But a major development has taken place in nuclear war since those times, the discovery of the importance of electromagnetic pulse. The idea that what you get in a nuclear war is mushroom clouds and cities simply vaporized and huge craters where cities used to be is wrong. What you now do with nuclear weapons is you explode them in the air above your enemy's cities and completely collapse all his electronics and electricity. So what was a civilization then becomes a complete chaos, and he's economically and politically and militarily crippled. And that is the way nuclear war is very likely to be fought. Nuclear war is more possible now than it has been for a very long time. And that is the difficulty. People who are seriously concerned with planning it know that they can actually use nuclear weapons. So the idea that we should embark on this coalition of the willing in which we send NATO troops into Ukraine against a country which has nuclear weapons is actually even crazier than it looks at first sight. People do need to recognize that they're being conned again as they were conned in the run up to the Iraq war. Everybody knows now that was a fraud. They need to understand that it's happening again.
But now, of course, the Labour government are using war and defence as a sort of method of getting growth in the economy. Because one of the things that they were saying yesterday, and Luke Pollard said it to me, Rachel Reeves said it in Parliament, you know, we're giving money now, because they're trying to copy the American model, we're giving money to British defence manufacturers, which will inevitably lead to more jobs, inevitably lead to more investment in the economy, and will inevitably lead to growth. So I said to Pollard, I said, are we now on a war footing then? And he said, no, but we're not on a peace footing either. I don't know what that means.
Well, indeed, there is this belief that war stimulates the economy. And to some extent, obviously, it does, but it also puts a huge strain on the economy. And it's an economy which is already almost actually terribly overheated by the fact that we're still in a deep, deep mess from the enormous amounts of money we spent, which we did not have during the COVID panic. Yeah. And that's the whole reason for the Chancellor's plight and for the plight of the government before, is this extraordinary amount of money which we spent, which we do not have, and the immense debt which this country has contracted. There are people who say, oh, governments can borrow as much as they like, it won't make any difference. It's not true. Ultimately, it catches up with you. And it catches up with you in the form of inflation. Now, we have very bad inflation in this country at the moment. Anybody who goes shopping knows that. The prices are far higher week by week than they were before, and the figures don't fully reflect how bad it is. But I think it could get very, very much worse. And the thing which I think an awful lot of people are hoping for, people who are seriously in debt, whether they're the governments or businesses, is that their debts will be wiped out by a large-scale inflation of the kind this country experienced in the 1970s. Well, that's all very well for them. But what you must also understand is that anybody who lives on a pension or any kind of fixed income, and all the benefits which we're constantly being told we have to protect, will be almost wiped out by a bout of inflation on that level. And playing in this way with the economy is worse than incompetent. It's almost unbelievably stupid.
Absolutely right. I can't let you go, Peter, without a nod to the movement of the clocks at the weekend. I know it's something that we've talked about.
Yes,
before,
indeed. Well,
but I thought I must give you the opportunity to give us your view of it.
Well, you were ridiculously saying it was a good thing. The days have been growing. Days have been growing longer for weeks, and they will continue to do so if left alone for right up until June. And there's absolutely no need to do this. What happens when they falsify the clocks? And by the way, can you think of it? If you falsify the weights, if you're a market trader, then you're open to prosecution. But we're actually ordered by the government to falsify our clocks to get them to read at the time.
I mean, I don't remember.
Time is real. I can't think of any other circumstance. If you falsified your speedometer on your car, if you falsified all the thermometers in hospitals or indeed on central heating systems, it's crazy. And what most people don't know, if you ask them, do the clocks go forward or backwards on Sunday night, they don't know. They have to look it up. And because they don't understand it. The whole thing is a national intelligence test, which 99.9% of the population fail. What is happening is the government is ordering everybody to get up early and go to work an hour early for the next, 8 months or so.
Yeah. Well, what if they're working from home? Working from home doesn't matter, does it?
Benefit whatsoever. And also, in quite a number of cases, it's bad for the health, particularly people with heart troubles. It's now recognised, and there is research which shows that quite a large number of people are seriously ill as a result of this clock, or I'd say as a result of following this clock change each year. It does absolutely no good. Why don't we just stop doing
listen,
it
I don't know where you got. I don't know where you got the idea that I was
national time.
I don't know where you got the idea that I was a massive, advocate.
Well, you were saying it was a good time.
I'm sort of agnostic. I'm sort of agnostic about it. I don't mind really. I don't really mind it. But anyway, listen. Don't forget, it's spring
forward.
forward.
You'll mind it on Monday morning because you'll have to get up an hour earlier.
No, I won't. I'll just go to bed an hour earlier.
Mind it. Sunday, everybody thinks, oh, okay, but on Monday morning, you have to start work an hour earlier. The schools start an hour earlier. The shops close an hour earlier in the evening. Every workplace, as I say, is affected. All the timetables broadcasting are affected.
Yeah.
You can't ignore it or live or live.
Do you change your clocks at home, or do you leave them on sort of winter time?
If I was living in retirement, I'd ignore the whole thing. But I'm still at work. I have to catch trains and go to work and deliver copy on time and stuff like that. I have to observe it. But I think it's completely stupid. As it's a national intelligence test. If people would only think about it, they demand that it stop. But everybody just submits to it. It's extraordinary.
It is. Listen, Peter, great to talk to you as ever. Thank you very much indeed. Enjoy the weekend, as much shorter as it is by an hour. Peter Hitchens, columnist of the Mail on Sunday there. Let's get a quick voice note from John on growth.
Morning, Mike. John here. Great show. Got my bumper sticker, thank you. There's a big site in Derbyshire, won't give too much away, big development site, and they're building really slowly. So I've said to the guy that's selling the houses, you're putting these up slowly. He says, yeah, we just haven't got the manpower, and the development, the site that was 4 years is now 7 years. Thanks, Rachel. Not quite got your finger on the pulse, have you?
That's not slow, is it? That's just dead slow. So it started a 4-year contract. It's now gone to 7 years. That's nearly twice as long. Unbelievable. Let's talk to Rupert Harrison, Senior Advisor at Macro Advisory Partners, former Chief of Staff to George Osborne, when he was Chancellor of the Exchequer during those dreadful days of what was called, the adverse times. And they were talking about the way that the government had to contract. They had to have all sorts of shortenings of public money being paid out, and austerity was the word. Rupert, very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Morning.
Is this austerity by another name?
Look, it's not really. When you look at what's happening to government budgets, there's a huge amount of money being poured in over the next couple of years, and then Rachel Reeves is being forced to pull some of it back. But I think it's more normal times. Like, all that money's going to go into priorities like the health service, a bit into defence. Other departments will have to cut back a bit. I think that's just normal service. The similarity is that Rachel Reeves is at the mercy of events, and she put herself in a situation in October where she had such little headroom against her fiscal rules that even quite a modest change in the forecasts forced her to rewrite her budget less than 6 months later.
Yeah, unfortunately so. And a lot of people asking the question about what is the point of the OBR. The OBR was sort of invented in your time in government. Is there any point to it anymore? It doesn't seem to get a lot right, does it?
Well, it's absolutely crucial. If we didn't have the OBR, we'd be much more at the mercy of international markets because of our very, very high debt levels. So what came before the OBR is that all governments need to produce forecasts. You can't plan the public finances unless you have a forecast.
Right.
But before the OBR, those forecasts were signed off by the politicians. And so we ended up in the situation where Gordon Brown was fiddling the forecasts to make things look better than they actually were.
Right.
Things never turned out as the politicians, when you're facing a difficult decision and you either have to do something difficult with tax or public spending, or you can just tweak a number in your forecast and hope that it all turns out. Which do you think the politicians used to choose?
Yes.
That ended up with forecasts that nobody believed, the markets didn't believe, and Britain's credibility was undermined, which is why back in 2010 we were teetering on the brink of a proper fiscal crisis. So the OBR has restored credibility to those forecasts. It gets things wrong because forecasting is really hard. Everyone who does forecasting gets it wrong, whether it's the Bank of England, whether it's the investment banks and the economists that you speak to on the show, no doubt. Everyone gets it wrong, but you have to have someone independent doing it. The problem is that the politicians increasingly are giving themselves such tiny amounts of headroom because they're just trying to live from budget to budget, that they are then at the mercy of these quite normal changes in forecasts. If you go back 15 years, in George Osborne's first budget in 2010, he gave himself 3 times as much headroom against the fiscal rules as Rachel Reeves did back in October.
Yeah.
And that's why it was a plan that was much more resilient. And so the fault is the politicians. The OBR gets the blame, but it's just a forecaster trying to produce forecasts in an uncertain world.
No, and I get that, and I take your point that all forecasting is hazardous and it's not always easy to be accurate. But if the OBR keeps getting its forecast wrong, there's not going to be much credibility left in it. I don't know what the answer to that would be, and I take your point that it's better to have an independent,
you say that, but
forecaster.
The interesting thing is it does have a huge amount of credibility, right? One of the things that went wrong in the mini-budget back in under Liz Truss was that the markets were very nervous about the fact that the government had bypassed the Office of Budget Responsibility. That was one of the key mistakes.
Yeah.
And so actually what
she wants to abolish it, of course, now.
Well, I know. Well, like, she needs someone to blame. But, the truth is we would all end up paying more on our mortgages, paying more for the national debt if we didn't have the OBR giving the country the credibility with markets that the forecasts are independent.
Is it not the case now that we've just got so much debt now in this country that there's almost no way out of it? I don't know what the way out of it would be, but the debt level now is just ridiculous, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it is high, and unfortunately we've had a series of shocks. We had a fiscal crisis back in 2010 when Gordon Brown let the public finances get out of control in the financial crisis. We then basically got them back under control. Then we were hit by COVID. Then we were hit by the Ukraine crisis and the energy shock. And governments have spent an enormous amount of money dealing with those. And that's why we have these high debt levels. Right. Now, I don't think there is a council of despair. We're not the highest amongst the developed countries. There are other countries with more debt than us. And actually, if you could go around properly reforming welfare, properly improving the productivity of the public services and gradually getting those public finances back under control, then I think that, there is still hope. We have a lot of strength in our economy. The problem is that at the moment, the approach we seem to be seeing is kind of sticking plasters, lurching from budget to budget.
Yeah, that is the problem. It will be ever thus, I guess. Rupert, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Rupert Harrison, Senior Advisor at Macro Advisory Partners, who was also Chief of Staff to George Osborne when he was Chancellor back in the early days of the first Tory government after Gordon Brown 2010. Let's get a voice note from Martin on trans.
Morning, Mike. Just heard about the census. I know of 2 people who actually filled it in and said that they were trans because of the ridiculous questions that were on that census. And I live in quite a small community. Martin from the Midlands.
I mean, I'm sure there are people that fill in the census form for all sorts of reasons. I mean, there's another one for you. If you filled in the census form and told a few lies, do let us know. Tell us what you said. Tell us what you told them. Because statisticians are the bane of my life, right? I don't believe very many things that come out of this Office for National Statistics because you have to take them with a pinch of salt. You can use the statistics as a guide, but you've also got to remember that they believe everything that they're told. Like we just heard from Martin. 2 people have said they're trans, must be trans. Put them down. That's there's another 200,000 of them. Blimey. I mean, how many of them are there? Apparently, we don't know because they made it up. They just made it up. They've even admitted it. Coming up, we're going to talk to Ashley Armstrong, business editor at The Sun. She's got a big piece on page 10. She says this: do you think times are tough now? Just wait till the workers' rights law kicks in. Crikey. This is Talk.
You've got a Chancellor that is not an economist. I don't think she knows much about numbers. She's totally reliant on the Office for Budget Responsibility and their delusional forecast. Nothing short of delusional. On the one hand, they've halved their growth forecast for 2025 from what they forecast just a few months ago, saying that the world has changed and it's all much more difficult geopolitically. And yet, magically, as though maybe they've been eating magic mushrooms, they've suddenly increased their growth forecasts every year thereafter.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 8:29. I'm here, of course, until 10 o'clock. And we're really rattling along. We've got lots of great messages coming in. We're still asking for your message on the NHS as well, because I'm sure that the government's up to something. You know, taking people off waiting lists, cancelling appointments, and then putting them on another waiting list. It means they haven't been waiting so long. We shall see if that's the point. We have, by the way, I should say this, we have asked Rachel Reeves to appear on the show this morning, but obviously she's doing every other programme apart from this one. I don't know why she doesn't want to come on here, but I dare say we've got a better guest anyway. We've actually got Ashley Armstrong from The Sun, who's the business editor there. Ashley, very good morning to you.
Morning.
Busy day yesterday.
Yes.
You've got a piece in the paper today on page 10. Think times are tough now. Just wait till the workers' rights laws kick in.
Yeah.
I mean, how much more can we take?
I know.
We're feeling
I know.
punch drunk in the ring.
I know. I didn't want to be a complete Eeyore about things because, you know, I am naturally kind of glass half full, but it just feels like there's another thing kind of, and Andrew Griffiths explained as a shadow Chancellor kind of explained it as an unexploded bomb. And
Yes.
I think it is that. It's like, you know, business has already been battered by the budget. There was nothing in there yesterday to help them out. And they've got this kind of employment rights reform,
Yes.
which everybody kind of is now kind of almost gearing up to. You don't know how bad it's going to be. It's going to be a jobs destroyer for a lot
really
of people.
is. And that in addition to the national insurance hike that's kicking in the 1st of April, which a lot of people are telling me in business is going to completely change the way they do business. They're having to let people go. You know, I know that there's a big car company in London that we use quite a lot. I'm not going to say their name, but I'm told that they're going to 0 hours contracts for all their drivers.
Oh, really?
They're no longer going to be paying for the cars. The drivers are all suffering because they're not going to make as much money.
Yeah.
You know, and all of that. So there's amazing numbers of sort of, you know, long-term effects here.
Yeah, and it's actually just a stupid move, really, to have done it, because it definitely targets those flexible workers, those part-time workers, which actually, if you think, if we're struggling with kind of inactivity, the best way to get people into work again is by taking those easier jobs on the flexibility, the part-time, that can kind of work around their lives. And actually employers, it's going to be so much more expensive to hire part-time that they might as well go full-time. So that's excluding even more people from getting back into work.
And this is at the same time as I'm trying to say they're going to try and get more disabled people or people who are claiming disability benefit into work at a time when employers are being discouraged from doing that. It's a sort of
like the jobs that they could actually
the left hand and the right hand don't seem to be talking to each other.
No, and once again it just kind of reinforces that message that maybe Labour just doesn't get business. It doesn't get business, despite all of their kind of run up to the election, you know, kind of talking about, you know, how we're working with business. I mean, business has done enough consultations. They were out of power for 14 years. How have they still not understood kind of what's needed?
And isn't it interesting, and I mean, we say this a lot, but I mean, it's getting worse with every week that passes, that they didn't seem to be prepared at all for what they were going to be doing. You know, despite everything they said about everything's fully costed, we won't be doing anything unless it's fully costed, and we're ready to hit the ground running. We've got, you know, teams of people ready to take over every government department. And they came in, and it was almost as though it was like sort of a bunch of sixth formers going, "Oh, blimey, look, can I sit in the chair and have a picture taken? Well, let's take all those pictures down. Let's put some more pictures up." And it was all this kind of ridiculous performative kind of stuff. And yet the meat and bones of running the economy seem to have been forgotten.
I mean, I think that's it. And, you know, Rachel Reeves kind of came in almost like as the antithesis to Liz Truss, right? She was secure economics. It was going to be stability.
The Iron Chancellor.
We're not going to be doing this. And yet, not only kind of in the budget did she change the fiscal rules. You know, we had yesterday, she blitzed through them because, like, the debt interest costs got so wonky that actually you're going to be paying so much more in debt. it's that tinkering at the seams that just seems to kind of suggest that actually what they came in with isn't there at all.
No, exactly right. And I wonder, because their first budget was all about growth, and you know, they were talking about, you know, everything that we're doing is all about the growth. And then yesterday, the first thing she said was, growth is going to disappear from 2% down to 1%.
Yeah, did you notice how quickly she said that?
Yeah, I know. And you think, well, okay, so your first go was a complete failure, in other words. So your attempt at making growth happen didn't work. So now what are you going to do? And there's nothing really in what she said yesterday that gives me any confidence that there's going to be any growth at all.
Well, to give her some credit, I mean, you know, she points at that kind of neverland of like in 4 years' time and housing reforms will pay off. But there's a long way to go. And as we, you know, just spoke about, you know, if we've got Trump kind of changing the way of the world by tweet kind of at 10 o'clock at night, how are you meant to make policy? And particularly that kind of housing reform, yes, it's something that, you know, actually the Tories had dreamed of for ages, you know, let's rip up planning, let's get building. But my God, haven't we seen how tricky that is to actually happen? And we know that there's a skills shortage and everything else. So actually getting and betting on that growth is quite tough.
So what happens next? I mean, she does now have to go until, if she survives, because a lot of people seem to think that, you know, she might not survive through the summer. But if she does survive through the summer and she makes it to another budget statement in October, I guess it would be, I mean, God knows what state the economy is going to be in by then.
Well, also as well, I mean, we've got pretty much every economist saying that autumn is going to be it. So we were spared yesterday from tax rates. Is going to be happening in the autumn, because that kind of fiscal headroom, that rainy day fund that is so wafer thin and bizarrely almost to the penny compared to what she did in October, that there's going to have to be some manoeuvring. And, you know, the world will probably have changed and probably got even more volatile, judging by how things are happening. So she'll have enough things and enough air cover to blame that on.
And I mean, in terms of the sort of the sum of all things, I suppose, lots of people are telling me the civil service cutbacks are not really what it says on the tin. 15% over 5 years. It's really only 3% a year, which is pretty much natural wastage. They're not really going to be suddenly slashing and burning through all sorts of corridors of the Home Office and the Foreign Office and all of that. So that's a bit of a shibboleth. And similarly, you know, the amounts of money that they say they're going to raise is all so far in the future that it's not really going to benefit anybody.
Well, that's it. It's kind of, you know, it's massaging kind of the numbers to make sure that they fit in by the end of Parliament, right? I mean, the civil service we all know is bloated, and, you know, there are probably cuts that are going to be there. It depends where the cuts fall, right? And if they are actually the right cuts. And she's talking about bringing in AI and tech and things like that. Well, a lot of them work from home most of the time, right?
Well, I spoke to Dave Penman, you know, who runs one of the big civil service unions. He was very relaxed, and I said, "Are you sure you're feeling all right?" You know, this guy used to sort of literally froth at the mouth when the Tories ever talked about taking one guy out of an office. And I got the impression from how relaxed he was that he wasn't really convinced that it was even going to happen.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, I think there's also maybe that element of, you know, it's been so well trailed, right? Some of them have been bracing for 11% cuts, and if it's actually going to happen on that level. I mean, if you tell somebody the worst thing that's going to happen, then actually when it comes down to it, well, it's not that bad.
Yeah, over 5 years, not that big of a deal. I mean, they could get 3% of people just volunteering for redundancy.
Yes,
which
which they've said that they are going to kick off, and
that might be enough for them.
Yeah, exactly, and I'm sure then they'll be able to get very better paid jobs in the private sector as well.
Well, maybe some of them.
Maybe
some. I think some of them have done so little for so long that they've forgotten how to do any work. Anyway, great piece, Ashley. Good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Ashley Armstrong, big piece on page 10 of The Sun today. If you think it's bad now, it's going to get a lot worse. I'm sorry to laugh, but, you know, I did what else to do. Coming up, what are we doing next? Jo Mackey's joining us. She's an employment law partner. She's going to talk about the National Trust, because there's a manager there who's accused of being a white saviour in some kind of race round. We'll get to that after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 8:38. I've got this from Stuart, who says, I think Peter Hitchens is 100% right about the nurses, and just like the people in the army who would not want to be held responsible for years after just for carrying out your job and your orders. And then one from Lynn, who says, Morning, Mike. I respect and admire Peter Hitchens very much, but I'm afraid that I disagree with him on the nursing issue. In my humble opinion, the problem with recruiting nurses is that nursing requires a degree, which is not only expensive, but ridiculous. In my experience, it delivers experience, confidence and knowledge to learn directly from your peers. Have a good day. Yeah, very good. I've got a lot of really good messages coming in on the NHS front, which I'll get to. But let's talk to get a voice note first from Stacey.
Morning, Mike. Long-time listener, first-time voice noter. Just a quick one on the NHS waiting list. I've had an issue with my knee for a long time, which I've been hoping to have physio with for a long time. This has been going on probably since about June, July last year. Finally received a telephone appointment to assess my knee. Had a in-face appointment arranged for the start of February or March, I believe it was. Changed my day off work to be able to attend the appointment. Woke up in the morning to a missed call and a voicemail, listened to it to be told, sorry, we cannot do your appointment today because we don't have anybody here that can do it. Who knows if I'll actually get this appointment this time round, but this is nearly a year in the process to see a physio on the NHS regarding the pain in my knee.
Unbelievable stuff. What do they expect your knee to be like after a year of not having any treatment whatsoever? Do they think it's got better or worse? I mean, this is part of the problem with the NHS. People's conditions deteriorate as a result of not being seen. And then the NHS has got more problems because they then have to sort the problem out, possibly with surgery, which they might have avoided if they'd seen the person earlier. It's absolutely ridiculous. 0344 499 1000. We'll keep those calls coming. We'll keep those stories coming as well. I've got Mark from Bolton has got a good story to tell me as well. Let's talk now to Joe Mackey, employment law partner at Burlington's, because you won't believe this story, right? This is somebody who actually works at the National Trust. She's a manager, and basically she's a heritage site worker. She was working in a site in Cheshire, and she is now suing the National Trust for race discrimination because she was asked to be part of its inclusivity team. So, you know, the DEI hire has now revolted against being hired because it's a DEI hire. She basically said that she was shocked, embarrassed, humiliated and very much degraded by an invitation from one of her managers to join this diversity network, which a lot of companies and organisations set up under the DEI plans. And so she's actually gone the other way and gone, why do you think I want to join a diversity network? Is it because I'm brown-skinned? She's of Pakistani and Indian heritage, of course. Her name is Abida Jenkins. Joe Mackey is here. Joe, very good morning to you. This is a kind of weird one, isn't it? It's kind of turned everything on its head, this.
Well, it's an interesting one, and she's lost, which is probably wise on the facts. And the Liverpool employment judge has been very wise in finding that she was overly sensitive. And I think the wording that the judge used was she had an unjustified sense of grievance to exaggerate things to suit her own agenda. Yeah. I think she was maybe after a bit of dosh from them, which is sometimes the case, I'm afraid. But I think the tribunal was right on the facts that Mrs. Jenkins, being the person who was working there, Mr. Carter said, would you like to be on the Diversity and Inclusion Committee? She said no, and then said she was really upset to have been asked, so he never asked her again. But she said she took huge umbrage at this and resigned.
Yeah.
But she didn't resign for a long time, and she didn't make any formal complaints about it at the time. There's a lot stacked against her, and it's really odd that she should have brought it so much after the event.
I suppose so, but doesn't it also illustrate, because of the whole diversity, inclusion, equity, blah scenario, that it is all a bit racist? Because, you know, you're saying that I want to hire you because you're black, or I'm going to hire you because you're trans, or I'm going to hire you because you've got one leg. You know, it's discriminatory, isn't it?
You can't have positive discrimination except on very specific grounds in this country. So I think things have gone too far. When you put it that way, yes, of course, it does seem wrong. Shouldn't be hiring me because I'm white or black. You should be hiring me because I'm the best person for the job. It's as simple as that.
Right.
The Equality Act is there to make a level playing field for people who have always been discriminated against in some way. over the years. People with cancer get discriminated to try and get back to work, women when they've had children. And in some cases that needs to be there. But in this case, it didn't. And this one was a bit of a try on. And I'm glad the judge found the way she did. I'm glad the judge made it so clear. It's rare you hear an employment tribunal judge make such a profound statement. To say she exaggerated evidence to suit her agenda is quite a strong comment.
Yeah, it really is. And I mean, we heard yesterday, because the thing that I find extraordinary about all of this is that, all of these companies and all these organisations, whether they be public sector or private sector, were so willing to get into this whole DEI business, but they've now sort of abandoned it because of Donald Trump, because they think they might lose out on government contracts. NASA yesterday, one of the latest to say that they've given up on their plan to put the first woman on the moon. They've given up on their plan to put the first woman of colour on the moon. They're just going to go, whoever sort of happens to turn up next as an astronaut will be the next one that gets on the rocket.
Probably the best way to go, really. If you're the best person for the job, you're the best person for the job.
Exactly.
But the thing that I do think is important is that we make the playing field has to be level. So, as a female footballer years ago, I couldn't play professionally, and I'm glad now that female footballers can play professionally so that we can get a chance to show the Lionesses are as good as the three Lions in their own way. So I'm just saying...
They're not really, though, are they?
It's important we have the level playing.
They're not really.
We are. We won the European Cup.
Yeah, but if they played each other, what would you think the score would be?
Oh, we'd win. We'd win. Lucy Bronze would run rings around Harry Kane. But anyway, that's not what I'm talking about.
If you actually think that, I don't think you should ever be employed as a lawyer ever again. Seriously.
Well, I don't work for football lawyers. Fair point.
No, listen, I'm very happy that the Lionesses have done so brilliantly well. And listen, don't get me wrong. I'm very happy the Lionesses have done brilliantly. And I always cheer them on when they win, and that's great. But there's no point in pretending that they're the same and as good as the men's play. It's just a fact.
I think on the comparisons of what they're good at technically, we've got an argument there, but I'm not going to get involved in that one with you. I do think, obviously, if we... it's like the old Billie Jean King thing. She played the bloke and she won. I mean, I wouldn't rule him out.
However, but that's because he was useless. She didn't play Rod Laver. She played a bloke who was hopeless.
He was
she might as well have played me. I would have lost to Billie Jean King as well. But anyway, listen.
That goes for an awful lot of people, I think. But fair enough.
It's good to talk to you, Joe. Thanks very much indeed. Joe Mackey, employment law partner at Burlington's. Because, of course, the most important thing is to employ women, right? Definitely, absolutely. Because just look at what Keir Starmer's done. Check it out.
It will also be the first budget delivered by a woman ever. That is a moment of pride. When Rachel Reeves stands up, she will be making history. And I can tell you, young women and girls across the country will be watching. They will look up.
From 2% in the autumn to 1% today.
They're not clapping now, are they? They're really not. Well done, Sir Keir. She's going to be a woman. Oh, my God. What an absolute plum. Mark in Bolton says this. Great show, Mike. I've had 4 pre-operation appointments cancelled on me since February here in Bolton. Sometimes they only ring the day before, and that was after booking time off at work. Then they have the cheek to tell you that each missed appointment cost the NHS 160 quid. Absolute joke. Yeah, but, I mean, each time they do it, are they putting you down off the waiting list? That's the interesting thing. That's the point I'm trying to get at, and that's the point I'm sure is what is going on. Coming up, we're going to be talking to Laurie Laird, economic commentator, about what's going on in the US of A under the Trump administration. Also, we might give another go to Marjorie Taylor Greene, because she is one of the most outspoken Republicans in the United States of America. Check out what she has to say coming next.
the noise.
That's true, although there are 200,000 members of Reform UK, and they are going to make a big noise actually this weekend. They're going to have a huge conference in Birmingham. I've spoken to one person involved who says 10,000 people will be there.
Amazing.
And I think the media is more interested, quite rightly actually, in Reform because they're leading the polls at the moment. Opposition is always very difficult, especially when you have a party that's just a bit...
I just find them uninspiring.
Yeah, I think
knackered, that's a great... Actually, I get that.
I think a lot of people feel the same way, but also there's no great love for Labour either.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. It's 8:50, 10 minutes to 9. Coming up in the final hour, we've got loads more for you. You're going to be very, very excited to hear the news. We've got Tim Montgomery who's coming on. We've got Mel Stride, the Shadow Chancellor. We've got Mike Neville as well, talking about violent crime, because you might have seen there's a couple of massively big fights that have been going on out there in the big wide world. Horrible youth swinging machetes around at each other. Paula says this: my husband had 2 physio appointments cancelled. Both times the letter said that he cancelled, which he hadn't. That meant that he had to see our GP to get more referrals. The GP said it's done because no physio was available. It's a way of shortening the list. It's obviously a fiddle. And that's absolutely right. Lewis says, this morning, Mike, the winter excuse for the NHS doesn't really correlate, as I've been waiting for a urology appointment for over a year. The letter said there would be a follow-up at 6 months. Also, don't get me started on my medicines being cocked up due to poor language used by the specialist, who wasn't English, in a letter to my GP regarding the prescription. So now I have to take a smaller dose and sometimes have to stop, as I don't have enough tablets each month. I'm supposed to be on medication every single day. I mean, everywhere you look in the NHS, there's a real problem, isn't there? And this from Simon on Rachel Reeves. Surely Rachel Reeves isn't making her decisions on her own, is she? Who's advising her? Surely one person isn't making those decisions on her own. Surely her policy choices have been shown to Starmer first. I don't get it. Do you know, Mike? Simon's in Devon. Well, I know somebody that we can ask that question to. Laurie Laird is here, economic commentator, of course. Laurie, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Is Rachel Reeves making these decisions on her own? I suspect she's not. I mean, she has a team, presumably, behind her. She's got the Treasury to rely upon. She's got the Office for Budget Responsibility to lean on as well. How is she getting it so wrong?
I suspect she's not making these on her own. And I suspect, much of what we're seeing here was sort of pre-announced. I mean, the original sin for Rachel Reeves was campaigning on a pledge, and this was Labour policy, not just Rachel Reeves, a pledge to not touch VAT, national insurance contributions, or income tax. That's why she's boxed herself in so badly here. That was Labour policy on the campaign trail, and that hasn't changed. So this is party policy. She's just the mouthpiece for it.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, she is. Let's have a look at what Mel Stride had to say, because he's coming on the next hour. He said she was reckless.
She chose to be reckless with a sliver of headroom against her fiddled targets. She borrowed and spent and taxed like it was the 1970s. Little wonder, Mr. Speaker, that the Chancellor has tanked the economy. Little wonder we have an emergency budget, all because of her choices.
I mean, he's not wrong, really, is he? Because they said, first of all, there wouldn't be a budget at this time.
He's a little overly dramatic. I mean, the economy is stagnant. It hasn't tanked. Things aren't looking great, but we're not in any kind of a recession or a depression. We're not seeing unemployment soaring up.
If you hang around long enough, Laurie, will be. Probably by next month, I would imagine.
We'll have to see. I think the problem here is, Mike, is that the economy's stagnating. We're not seeing a whole lot of growth. We're not seeing contraction either. And I don't see a whole lot that's going to change that picture. Some of the more sensible things that Rachel Reeves done, looking at the planning system, looking at building infrastructure, these are things that take a very long time to come to fruition. That extra money that she threw at the NHS in her budget in October, again, this is going to take a long time before anybody sees any improvement. And what that means, I think that I don't think we're going to see any tax rises. I think that's sort of the headline that we're seeing today. When the budget comes in the autumn, she's going to have to raise taxes. I'm not so sure. And I think what's most interesting, Mike, is not what she said, what she didn't say. At some point soon, we're going to have to look at the other side of the equation, not raising revenue, but cutting spending. And she sort of edged there yesterday, talking about culling Social Security a little bit, but she hasn't touched the shibboleth, which is pension spending. No one is talking about the triple lock. The triple lock essentially is what gives pensioners an uplift in their pensions that's well at the moment, well above the level of inflation. At some point soon, Labour's going to have to look at this. It's just too expensive.
Well, they're going to have to do better on benefits as well, and they're going to have to do better on cutting back the civil service, because the civil service cutback is really meaningless because it's 15% over 5 years. It's really not more than anything other than just people volunteering for redundancy. That's all it is. It's not really a slashing and burning of Whitehall, is it?
It's also something we see across the world. It's a very easy thing for finance ministers to grab for. We're going to be more efficient. We're going to get rid of some bodies. We hear it all the time. We hear it in many different countries. We don't tend to see it ever come to fruition. Look, Elon Musk in the U.S. is trying to do the same thing. He's finding it's not that easy to do. He's also finding that some of these people he wants to cut actually do stuff.
Yeah,
he is. To make
but
sure
they are genuinely firing people, which she's not doing. I mean, she's basically going to go to all the departments of state and say, does anybody fancy volunteering for redundancy? Here's a very generous package. Off you go. It's not really going to make much difference. But now she's also saying
it's an easy thing to talk about.
She's saying today, because they're all dead scared of Donald Trump, aren't they? They're terrified of saying anything bad about him. She said today that she does not want to escalate Donald Trump's trade wars after the US president slapped a new 25% tariff on all imported cars. So they're just going to suck that one up, apparently.
Let's see whether that tariff comes to fruition. Donald Trump has had a bit of a history of announcing tariffs and then pulling them back. I mean, it's almost sport for him. And also, with other things going on in Washington, it could be that announcement last night, this 25% on all imported cars and car parts, could be a little bit of a distraction technique. Certainly, it will hurt U.S. car makers a lot more than it will hurt anyone else. But, you can see Rachel Reeves and Jonathan Reynolds as well have been saying we're talking about a trade deal, something, watch this space.
Yeah, I don't pay any attention to Jonathan Reynolds ever since he lied about being a solicitor, by the way.
He looks like a lightweight. He really does when you see him in a room with grown-ups. But, ask Canada and Mexico what it's like to be in a trade deal with the U.S. Signing a trade deal with the U.S. doesn't mean that Donald Trump is actually going to abide by that deal. There's a very good trade deal between Canada, Mexico, and the U.S., and Donald Trump is driving a truck through that. Yeah. So you can talk all you want about getting a trade deal, and it's really talked about as the holy grail here. If there were some kind of a deal, you got to look at what the UK might have to give up, and it may be things that voters don't want, different kind of agricultural standards. Get ready for those stories about chlorinated chicken.
Oh, we're not going to go back there again, are we? After all these years, blimey!
I think we are going to go there again.
Well, they didn't. Well, it was fake news last time around. It's fake news this time around. It didn't happen. It will never happen.
Look. It's not fake, Mike, that there are different agricultural standards in the U.S. and the UK.
Yes, I know that.
The US is going to demand
it's a nonsense scare. No, but sorry, Laurie, it's a nonsense scare story because people use chlorine to clean all sorts of things. You can buy chlorinated lettuce in this country. But anyway, I'm going to let you go because we've got lots to get on with. Laurie Laird, thank you very much indeed. Let's get a voice note from Graham on Rachel Reeves.
I watched Rachel from accounts yesterday. She seems to think that if she throws enough phrases around by way of obfuscation, we'll all be fooled into thinking she's really good at her job. 2.5 billion here, 50,000 job cuts there, 5 billion there, disability benefits cut, PIP payments trimmed. Note she didn't mention the 8 billion a year on migrants. And the OBR says that by 2029 it will all be great. She seems to forget that the OBR forecast last October was so accurate that 6 months later they've had to cut it in half. I live 100 yards from the bus stop. The OBR couldn't get within 10 minutes of how long it would take me to walk there. But we're now expected to believe that they'll be jammed tomorrow because the OBR can forecast into 2029. And the lies, it's all lies. You'll have £700 more in your pocket by 2029. Yeah, we're going to fall for that one. Just like not a penny more on your council tax. Just like energy bills coming down by £300. Like the national insurance hike that was a play on words to hide a lie. Just like the betrayal of the pensioners. Just like the tax rise on our farmers. And don't even get me started on Just Stop Hoyle.
Listen, Graham, that is a great voice note. Voice note of the day, I think. Absolutely brilliant. Well played, sir. We're getting into it more and more. I tell you what, in the final hour of the show, Mel Stride's going to be here. He made what I think was a great speech yesterday. Rachel Reeves is still in denial. She thinks that she's a great woman. She's not. She's not even a great person. This is Talk.
I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so that we reach that level in 2027.
The answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great, great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us because, as you know, that's right there. That's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you are not
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 9. We're in the final hour of the show already. I don't know where the time goes. We've already done 3 hours. Extraordinary stuff. There's lots going on. We spoke to Peter Hitchens in last hour. Ashley Armstrong from The Sun on if you think things are bad now. Wait until the Workers' Rights Bill kicks in. Wait until the National Insurance hike kicks in. Coming up in this hour, Tim Montgomery joins us, founder of Conservative Home, now with Reform, of course, as a supporter, not a player. And, of course, we're going to talk to Mel Stride as well, the Shadow Chancellor, who was pretty eviscerating in his comments about Rachel Reeves yesterday. Listening to the news just then, Rachel Reeves says that she got into politics originally to help children. Well, how's that going exactly? She's not really helping anyone. She's created this terrible state of the economy. She inherited a reasonably good economy from the Tory party, despite the lies of Keir Starmer saying, oh, inflation was at 11%. It wasn't back in July, matey. And instead of which, they've now trashed the economy, they've tanked the economy, and nobody has got one good word to say about what Rachel Reeves has done. Have a listen to what you've been saying about it this morning.
Morning, Mike. Just on my way to work. Some people do in this country.
Good morning, Mike. This is my first time doing a voice note, so I'm a little bit nervous.
I'd suggest it's not the OBR we need, it's Obi-Wan Kenobi, because my God, we're in a pickle.
Morning, Mike. Long-time listener, first-time voice noter.
Great show as ever. Peter Hitchens, complete tosh as usual. Spring forward, fall back. It's pretty darn simple. And if he did know anything about it, he knew that the clocks would change for 6 months, not 8 months.
Thank you very much indeed. I mean, poor old Peter Hitchens, he gets it in the neck quite often, but he hates the clocks changing. It's as simple as that. Clocks change this weekend, of course. Front page of the Daily Mail, deluded is what it says about Rachel Reeves. She seems to be very happy with herself, smiling away. One question I've got, why did she go to work wearing what looks like a onesie, a jumpsuit? For heaven's sake, you're the Chancellor of the Exchequer. You're the second most important person in the government. Surely she might have put a suit on or something. She claimed to be restoring economic stability and delivering a decade of national renewal. The reality, our growth forecast for this year has been slashed in half. Can we get Keir Starmer's comments on whether he's still got faith in the the Chancellor of the Exchequer? Have we got that?
I have full confidence in the Chancellor. Thank you.
There you go. Just exactly what they say about football managers just before they sack them. Who knows if he will sack her? I don't know if he will. Let's get it on, though. This is Morning Glory. 0344 499 1000. You know what to do. Oh, there's more hands on shoulders. Oh, Macron. He's just watching here. If you are watching, if you're listening on the radio, Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron back together. The boys are back in town, this time in Paris, I think. Keir Starmer's gone over there to talk to him about the coalition of the willing, and Macron has put his arm around him a couple of times, and they're now standing on the steps. I don't know if that's the Elysee Palace there. They're really, really quite friendly now. There they are, shaking hands, posing for the cameras. It's not a good look, I'm afraid.
Very handsy, they really
they're
are.
Very handsy. Well, I said this about Keir Starmer. Sorry, Tim Montgomery's here. Very good morning to you. Officially.
Morning, Mike.
He's got this terrible habit. When Rachel Reeves finished and sat down yesterday, and you know that normally what you get from the Prime Minister is a pat on the back or something like that. He puts his hand on her shoulder. And oh, that's my microphone. Sorry. Puts her hand on his shoulder like this and leaves it there for about 5 seconds. Now, call me old-fashioned, but if you do that in an office now and put your hand on anybody's shoulder, whether it's a man or a woman, you probably get reported to HR.
Yeah, it's HR.
Also, there he is there. He also did that terrible thing in America when he saw Donald Trump. When he went, "Here's my letter from the King," and then put his hand on Trump's shoulder for slightly too long as well. Yeah. He's definitely got a sort of an issue, hasn't he, with being handsy.
I think he's probably been told that this is the way to overcome the fact that he's sort of a bit of a grey person. Yeah. And but it looks awkward the way he does it.
It does.
It just does it that moment or two too long for it to be natural.
Yeah, because it's not really a pat. It's not really a sort of a gesture of affection. It's a kind of, I'm putting my hand there and just leaving it there. Yeah. It's quite odd, isn't it?
Yeah, no, this is very odd, yeah.
I mean, a terrible day, I think, for the government yesterday. Rachel Reeves getting traduced all over the place in the papers this morning. Even the Mirror and the Guardian have gone for her because the Joseph Rowntree Foundation have said they're going to put 250,000 people into poverty.
Labour values.
Yeah, I mean, hard to believe, isn't it? It's hard to believe that they're doing it. But the trouble is, are they really doing it? Because I'm not convinced that they're doing anything.
Well, I used to work for Ian Duncan Smith, and he undertook, he introduced universal credit, for example. Right. And the one thing you could say about what the Tories and the Lib Dems did when they were in coalition was they reformed welfare for a purpose. It was like there was a big picture reform. They were introducing a new benefit that was that made work pay. What Labour aren't doing, they're not even doing any big reform. They're just cutting. They're just like cheese paring. And I think it's a general criticism you can make of Rachel Reeves is, what's the point of any of this? It's like she's managing little bits of pockets of money, but for a government that said growth was the big mission, where's the big picture? Right. The only thing that they seem to be doing is building houses. But I don't know whether you noticed the figures yesterday, Mike. If you look at the number of new houses that they proposed to build by the end of this Parliament, and then you look at the extra amount of immigration that's going to come into this country, the new housing only just keeps up with the level of the immigration. So actually, British people already here, the chances of them getting a house aren't increased at all.
And somebody, did they not, I think, in the last few days, let it slip that, yes, there would be houses being made available for migrants coming into the country. So immediately, of course, people say, well, what proportion? Is it going to be 50%? Is it going to be 75%? What on earth is going on? And again, nobody really believes the numbers. You know, they're not going to build 1.5 million houses because they haven't got even Jackie Smith admitted they haven't got the wherewithal. They're spending another 600 million attempting to train brickies and sparkies, you know, carpenters and plasterers and electricians and all the rest of it. But that's, again, all of it's down the road. Nothing actually, there's no jam today, is there?
No. And you can bet, you're right, to be sceptical about that 1.5 million figure for house building. But do you think 1.5 million more immigrants will come in over the next 4 years? Of course they will. Of course they will.
Well, we're running around about sort of not far off 1 million a year at the moment, if you count the illegals and the so-called legals. And I mean, there is literally no more room in the country. The country is full.
We're overwhelmed. Some would say swamped. Well, you get in trouble for saying a word like
not
swamp,
anymore.
you?
Not on this show, you don't, because I think there is a sense that in some communities, you know, they've been changed completely, and people can't get their kids into schools. They can't get their children doctor's appointments. They can't get children dentists at all because they haven't got enough. You know, there's a reason for all of that. Nigel Farage is very right to point that out. You know, what holds all these things together? It's the fact that we've got a lot more people here now.
No, immigration is the issue in British politics. And I'm afraid the fact is that so many people are coming into our country. The British people rightly feel they aren't the priority of this government. They really aren't the priority.
No, I mean, I get more and more people calling in and leaving voice notes to me saying, I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, I work until about 6 o'clock at night, you know, I've got a job at the weekend, I'm trying to feed my family, everything's going up in price, my electricity bills are getting higher, I'm paying more and more tax. What is the bloody point when you've got billions of pounds going out every single year to illegal migrants who are being put up in hotels who don't have to pay for anything?
No, it's unbelievable. And I heard you've been listening to your programme, another great programme, Michael, all morning. And the fact is, will she survive? Because although we've just been talking about Keir Starmer, you know, patting her on the back, the reality is he has really given economic policy to her. He's not really interfered. He's not interested in economic policy. She's been able to run it, but it's not going well. And I think there's going to come a time shortly. You've got the newspapers there in front of you, all terrible headlines. He's not going to keep loyal to her.
He can't. I mean, I keep hearing from people, we had Kwasi Kwarteng on this week, and everybody says, oh, well, the thing is he can't really sack his Chancellor because if he does, that reflects badly on him, and we all know that then will probably mean he's out of a job. But I think the time has now passed. I think she's crossed the Rubicon. She's so bad that it's now affecting not just the government, but the whole country.
And if growth is your main mission, and we had the data yesterday from the OBR, whether we believe the OBR or not is another question, but if you look at the OBR's numbers, they're only talking about 1.8% growth by the end of this Parliament. 1.8% growth is below the usual trend rate of growth for this economy. So if that's their main objective and they're only achieving that, it's pretty unimpressive.
I mean, even under Rishi Sunak, it was about 2.5%, wasn't it? I mean, so they were doing a lot better. We've got a little montage here, which we've been working on all morning. This is Rachel Reeves using the buzzword of the current Labour government, which is, of course, working people. Check it out.
To provide security for working people, a government on the side of working people to secure Britain's future and to deliver prosperity for working people, to ensure security for working people. There is nothing Labour about working people paying the price for economic irresponsibility. We can spend more on the priorities of working people. When working people are paying their taxes, giving working people the chance to fulfil their potential, we protected working people. I will always put working people first.
Working people, apparently, are the answer to all of our ills. 15 times she said it. And this is an invention, isn't it, by Labour? And it's a bit of a sort of a smoke and mirrors job, because nobody really knows what they mean by working people. What we seem to think that they mean is public sector workers who don't have any savings. That would appear to be what they mean.
Well, there was just a time, I think it was really Tony Blair that sort of introduced this whole idea of using catchphrases and repeating them endlessly. And you know, for a while we sort of, it was a new form of communication and it was quite effective.
Right.
But the trouble is, the politicians, they carry on every fashion far too long,
Yes.
and now we hear these things. And we know that it's a confection.
Yeah.
They've come up with it to try and hoodwink us.
Right.
And you know, don't look at the fact that the economy is stagnating. Right. Hear us say working people, and it doesn't work anymore.
No, because people who are working know that they're worse off. They know that they're being given a shorter shrift by this government. They know that they're also subsidising the lives of more people, because we saw a statistic the other week where it said 52% of people in this country are now reliant on the government for their income. Now, whether that means they're public sector workers or they're unemployed or, you know, they're in disability benefit or whatever it is, you know, that's more than half of the population being supported by less than half of the rest of it.
And people get a tax statement. I don't know whether everyone looks at their tax statement. It's actually quite
I try not to.
It's quite interesting, actually, because it tells you what proportion of your money, where it's going.
Right.
And I was actually quite surprised. I always thought that, you know, I knew that welfare and pensions was bigger than NHS.
Right.
But you know now, welfare on its own is bigger than the National Health Service.
Yes, I know.
It's extraordinary fact.
It used to
welfare on its own is bigger than what we spend on the NHS.
Right.
That's an extraordinary.
And this is my point to what we talked about earlier. As you said, when you worked with Ian Duncan Smith, he tried to cut back on disability allowances and all that. But in the end of the day, it always goes wrong because you end up cutting the wrong people out, don't you? But what they should be doing is looking at all of the people who are claiming benefits for being anxious. You know, anybody under the age of 30 who says that they've got ADHD and they need a benefit payment for it and a free mobility car, you just cut them out automatically and say, look, we'll help you get a job, we'll help you get back to feeling like a normal working person, but you cannot any longer hide behind what you say the condition is that you've got, which prevents you from working, because it doesn't.
No. What we need is a very much more strict regime. People do need support from welfare to work, but actually there's very few young people who should be on benefits, and certainly the number of people we have at the moment on benefits is way too much.
It's way too much.
And the country can't afford it.
No, but I mean, do you have any hope or even faith that they will make those cuts and make them properly?
No, because I think they're just cutting them without sort of really putting in any reform, and so I'm pessimistic, I'm afraid.
Okay.
Not a very happy thought for this sunny morning.
Sometimes you have to be pessimistic. I'm about as optimistic a person as you'll ever meet, but I mean, I'm optimistic because I know what I'm going to have to do to continue to be successful in life, and it won't be anything to do with the government, and I'll have to find ways of making sure that they don't take any more tax off me as best I can in all legal ways that I can do it, because I'm sick to death of subsidising a load of ne'er-do-wells and migrants who come into this country on my shilling. And I'm like lots of other people. I work hard for a living. Some people don't call it work. You know, they say to me, you know, you've never done a day's work in your bleeding life, just sit there and talk crap. But actually, it is quite hard to get up at 4:20 every single morning.
I couldn't do it.
I have to give up certain things. That I have to go to bed early and all of that. Anyway, Mel Stride is here as well. We're going to talk to the Shadow Chancellor shortly. Let's have a quick look though at what he said after Rachel Reeves' announcements yesterday.
She chose to be reckless with a sliver of headroom against her fiddled targets. She borrowed and spent and taxed like it was the 1970s. Little wonder, Mr. Speaker, that the Chancellor has tanked the economy. Little wonder we have an emergency budget, all because of her choices.
That was Mel Stride yesterday. We're going to go live to him now down in Westminster, I think, in College Green. Mel, very good morning to you.
Mike, good morning.
Very well said, I think, yesterday, Mel. I mean, it's hard to believe that we are where we are, isn't it? You know, this is a Chancellor who set out her stall back in October and said that growth was the only thing that mattered. The big G, we're going to be creating situations for businesses to grow. We're going to invest in the public sector. We're going to do all these things. 6 months later, it's all gone horribly wrong, and we've had to downplay it from 2% to 1%.
Absolutely right, Mike. In fact, what Rachel Reeves said back in the day was her primary objective was growth, growth, growth. She then promptly talked down the economy, came up with this fictitious £22 billion black hole from the for the economy, which the OBR itself has now debunked. She slapped taxes to an extraordinary level on businesses that, as you say, killed growth stone dead. But look, she also taxed and spent and has been borrowing like it is the 1970s. And when you do that, that is an inflationary pressure, and that's why interest rates, of course, have been much higher for much longer than they would otherwise have been. And Britain's paying the price. You know, higher mortgages, higher debt servicing costs, all down to Rachel Reeves's choices.
And what is it that that Rachel Reeves thinks is going to change? Because I don't believe any of the measures that she called on yesterday or is going to bring in will have anything but an even further negative effect.
Well, absolutely, Mike. And you know what? One of the things that hasn't been factored into the OBR's numbers and forecast is the employment legislation and the effects of that. And we know that that's going to be a multi-billion-pound burden to businesses. So we're in a very bleak place. Look, she trashed and burnt all of her headroom against the fiscal numbers. And just for your viewers' benefit, you know, the fiscal headroom is the margin you have basically against your economic credibility as a Chancellor. Well, she blew the whole lot and more. And she's now rebuilt this through various decisions that she's taken, but it's hard to imagine that that isn't going to come under further pressure, and we might not in the autumn, I'm afraid, at the next budget be looking at some more hard choices, maybe around tax increases.
Yeah, and that is really going to be something that the public will not stomach, because I think, judging from what I get told every single day by the people that listen to this show and watch it, is that, you know, taxes are as high as they've ever been, even higher than they were under your government, and people can't take any more. I mean, there's nothing else left to be taxed, for heaven's sake.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, Mike, you know, you're right, taxes went up under the last government, and there was one very powerful reason why that happened is we spent £400 billion supporting the economy through COVID and cost of living payments through the high inflation imported from Ukraine. But this government has no excuse for why the tax burden is going to be rocketing up on their watch, and the OBR tells us that it'll reach the record level in our history by the end of this Parliament. And it's down to these reckless choices of massive borrowing, massive taxation and killing growth in the economy.
Yeah, and what about the OBR in this situation? Because Liz Truss has been calling for that to be disbanded. It was kind of invented under George Osborne's austerity campaign when he inherited that ghastly economy from Gordon Brown, who had overspent and overborrowed as well. Is there any point to it anymore? Because it doesn't seem to get much right, really.
Well, I think that there is a serious point about having an independent forecaster that marks the Chancellor's homework. I mean, let me rephrase the question. You know, would it be a good idea, for example, to not only let Rachel Reeves mess up the economy within the forecasts of the OBR, or to say to her, well, actually, you can have a blank cheque, write your own forecasts? I don't think many people would think that's a good idea. So I think some independent checks and balances in that way is a good idea. I do think there are questions that we as a party will want to be thinking about deeply in the months and years ahead as we put together our economic plans. We've got plenty of time to do that, around the way in which the OBR functions, how it scores various fiscal interventions, and you know, how it scores growth, for example, in those terms. So I'm not saying that everything should stay set in aspect, but I do think there is an important role for an independent forecaster as a restraint, and well, not a restraint, as a check of the Chancellor's homework.
Right. And what happens in April? Next month we're going to see a hike in national insurance. We're going to see all sorts of other pressures being put on businesses, not least hospitality businesses, but other businesses as well, who are all accepting that they're going to have to spend a lot more money on running their own business. There's not much hope out there for anyone who's looking for growth, is there?
Well, I'm afraid the way that the Chancellor's gone about the economy, I think you're broadly right. I'm very fearful about the further impacts on businesses now. And look, Mike, you and I know that it is not governments, certainly on their own, that generate growth. It is businesses, it is entrepreneurs, it is people that get up. I heard you saying getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning to do what you do. It's people that do that create the wealth, that allow us to generate the tax revenue to pay for those public services. And that's something that, you know, this Labour Party just doesn't understand. You know, if you look at their front bench, how many of them have actually set up a business? You know, my background was that in the 1980s I set up my own company in my 20s. I did that here and in the United States. I don't talk about working for other businesses. I'm talking about setting up a new startup, employing people, taking those tough decisions and risks and so on.
Right.
And you know, going into Parliament later on in life with that experience. We're seeing none of that on the Labour side. What we're seeing is an employment rights bill that is driven by the trade unions, for example. You know, where is business in Labour's calculations? It's just completely disappeared. That's where the black hole is. The black hole with, you know, which should have business at the centre. We've got a black hole instead.
And even as they were talking yesterday about putting up sort of defence spending and creating more jobs and pushing British industry forward because they're going to be now suddenly, you know, creating more weapons and, you know, hiring more people and all of that. You know, at the same time as that, they're charging them more for everything they do. The national insurance rates are going up, you know, minimum wage is going up. So everything that they're saying that they're doing to boost the economy is costing those companies even more money.
Yeah, absolutely right. Look, if you tax something, you get less of it. Okay, you don't need to be a first-class economist to know that. Everybody knows that. And what did the Chancellor choose to tax? She chose to tax jobs. So that's why in the OBR's forecast that we got yesterday, unemployment is up this year, it'll be up next year, it'll be up the year after, and it will not diminish or go down at any point during this Parliament, according to those forecasts. So that's because the Chancellor just doesn't get it. You know?
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, there is bad times coming. I don't wish to be the harbinger of doom here, but I mean, I do worry that by the time we reach, you know, the autumn statement, God knows where the economy's going to be.
Well, I think we are in precarious times. I don't think the Chancellor has either the appropriate level of headroom to withstand any shocks, and I don't think she's built that resilient, growing, productive economy that we need to withstand those shocks. And by shocks, I mean things like tariffs and so on around the world. These are things that come around from time to time, and you have to have a strong economy to deal with them. And I'm afraid this Chancellor has, you know, left us in a very fragile situation.
Yeah, I'm afraid so. Good to talk to you, Mel. Thanks very much indeed. Mel Stride MP, Shadow Chancellor, just as concerned as many of you will be about where this economy is going and where this Labour Chancellor and where this Labour government is going. The question, I suppose, is, will Rachel Reeves last until the autumn statement? She may not. Leslie in Torbay says this: I can't believe it. I just got my South West water bill yesterday and it has risen by 48%. What are we getting for this? Polluted seawater, weeks of contaminated water and a switch off last year in the Brixham area. I asked them what we were getting for our money and the answer was, we want to go greener. Well, the start would be to take the polluted green water out of the rivers and the sea. It's unbelievable, isn't it? On the NHS front, Sally says, morning, Mike. I had 2 letters rearranging my appointment with the NHS, one cancelling my appointment and another saying they understood I didn't need treatment anymore. I had to ring them to put them straight, just to be told they were sorry, but there had been an error on their system. How many times is this happening? Brilliant show. Well, you know, it's a very good question. People are getting NHS appointments and then getting them cancelled. I think there's something going on. Keith in Oswestry says, I had an NHS appointment on Monday at 9 p.m, which I travelled 250 miles to attend. I got to the hospital and was told my appointment had been cancelled because they hadn't received the medicine they needed for my procedure. I mean, thanks for letting us know. Unbelievable, isn't it? 26 minutes past 9. Coming up, we're going to speak to Mike Neville, who's here to talk about another episode of violence on our streets. This one particularly terrible. Gangs fighting in front of terrified passengers on the tube station here in London. This is Talk.
price are we going to have to pay in this country, along with other European countries, to significantly increase our defence expenditure to make sure not so much that we're able to fight a war, but we're actually to deter further aggression from Russia. And that's what it's all about. And the move from 2.3 to 2.5, like so many things the government's doing, just isn't touching the sides. There's going to have to be a much more significant increase in our defence expenditure to 3 or maybe even 3.5%.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 9:29, 9:30 coming up, and of course half an hour left to go on the show. We're going to talk to Mike Neville in a moment, former Metropolitan Police Detective Chief Inspector. On the NHS front, we've got this from JB in Aberdeenshire. Hi Mike, I've been waiting for a hernia operation for nearly 3 years. A tiny tear 3 years ago, now a gaping hole. I'll be walking around with my guts in a carrier bag if I have to wait any longer. Bag for life. Get it? When I was in for my bladder cancer check, I asked the surgeon if she would stitch me up while I was under, but protocols don't allow that, even though she is probably more qualified. Absolutely right. And Stephen says this from Cheadle Hume. Rachel from accounts conjures up a vision of a bossy head girl who's constantly pleased with herself, but only really impresses her mother. And one from Joanna in Salisbury, who says, hi Mike, basic living, everything I pay out for has gone up, almost £2,000 a year. I just turned off the heating during the winter. I can't cut back on anything else. Really basics like food, electric, house insurance, car insurance, fuel and running costs. Where is my £500 better off? Well, apparently they're only saying you're going to be £500 better off by about sort of 2028 or something. So you've got to wait quite a long time, 3 more years before you're going to be better off. Let's get a voice note. We've got a lot of people ringing in about. Sorry, this is a montage of Rachel Reeves talking about fiscal rules. Check this out.
I set out our new fiscal rules. These fiscal rules are non-negotiable. I said that our fiscal rules were non-negotiable. We control day-to-day spending to meet our fiscal rules. To secure Britain's future. To secure Britain's future. To secure Britain's future. Let me turn now to the impact of increased uncertainty for thousands of military families. The increased global uncertainty for families. This period of heightened uncertainty. More security for families. Homes for our military families.
Years. I'm not sure anybody's buying any of that, really, are they? I mean, you know, Keir Starmer might put his hand on your shoulder for a little bit longer than he should. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. But it's not working, is it, really? Let's talk to Mike Neville, former Metropolitan Police Detective Chief Inspector. A story came across our desk earlier about yet another machete fight, this time on a tube station platform in full view during the day, broad daylight, of a load of actual passengers. This took place in Queensbury Station at North West London, which I think is on the Bakerloo line. Is the Jubilee line? Jubilee line. And it's one of those that's out in the open. And these guys are just slashing away at each other with machetes. Mike, what's going on?
Well, it's absolutely out of control, isn't it, Mike? We normally associate these sort of knife attacks with dark corners in the middle of the night. And here it is. It's when people are going home from work at 5:30 in the evening. But the problem is it's every level. So you've got the police officers, the Met Police, nearly 30-40% of all knife crime occurs in London. And so you've got the Met Police, the officers there are frightened of stopping and searching people because they're accused of racism, and the police's reaction to it is to have a stop and search charter rather than just get on with stop and search and support the officers. We need politicians and senior officers to support officers on the ground. But even if the officers actually catch these characters, and we see thousands of knives actually taken off the street by stop and search, but only 3 out of 10 people caught carrying a knife go to jail. And even if you get caught twice, you're supposed to automatically go to jail. But only 4 out of 10 of those go to jail. So it's an absolute mess from top to bottom, and it's no wonder that they can just, you know, have these sword fights in the middle of the day.
Exactly right. I mean, supposedly ninja swords are going to be banned, right? But it's not going to happen until the 1st of August. I don't know why they wait until then. You know, wait till the summer holidays come. So it'll be really bad on the beaches, you know, all through July. Apparently it's going to be illegal to possess, manufacture, import or sell ninja swords. Well, why can't they just do it now?
Well, the trouble is already, Mike, it's already sort of illegal to have those items. And this is all window dressing by politicians who say, well, we'll increase the penalty from 1 year to 2 years. When 2 years in prison really means 1 year, and you get released after 40% of that after about 3 or 4 months. So the whole thing is a trick. And it's a deception, really, on the public to say we're doing something. Because the trouble with knife crime, of course, you can cut off the internet, you can blunt all knives and whatever else. But if I'm so determined to stab somebody, I'll just go into the kitchen and I've got access to all manner of dreadful weapons there. And what they don't, the elephant in the room is it's young men, often young black men in London, who are committing this crime. And unless we're honest about this, we can never, ever sort it out. So rather than politicians telling us about, oh, we've got to have all these new laws, there's enough laws to deal with every kind of knife and weapon that we ever see. We just need politicians and senior police officers to back up officers and say, look, they're doing their best. They can't help who commits crime. It's not elderly Asian ladies carrying knives around the street, so we don't stop elderly Asian ladies wandering around the street. But the police have got to be honest about things.
Absolutely right. Because these, I mean, you all know better than me. I mean, these videos, I mean, we picked on this one today. You can find one pretty much on any given day in any given part of the country. You know, it's bad in London, but it's not the only place where it happens. I mean, I saw some footage over the weekend, I think it was, of a party that was going on somewhere. I think it might have been in East London or
It's an Elm Park, Mark. Yeah. It's an Elm Park.
Elm Park, that's right. And where a load of youth sort of basically came in, and there was this huge bundle, a huge fight, went on for ages.
Well, you don't have to see. We've had, you know, people stabbed, lads stabbed in Sheffield at school, a teacher stabbed in Wales. This is all over the place. And while people know that if you carry a knife and even if you stab somebody, you're not guaranteed to go to jail. It sends out completely the wrong message. And as I say, these judges find ways around it. The law says if you get caught twice, you go to prison. So how come only 40% of those people get locked up in jail? It's an absolute scandal.
It really
is. Just making us unsafe.
Well, the other one that was amazing to me was over the weekend, I think it was, the story from Sheffield, where 2 gangs of Eritreans were going at each other. You know, one lot apparently in support of the government, another lot against the government, and they're fighting on the streets of Sheffield. And you kind of go, well, why don't you go back to Eritrea and fight in the streets of Eritrea?
Well, we're already fighting over Israel and Gaza here, aren't we? Now it's Eritrea, and we seem to be bringing the world's problems here, and people who are very violent, who we know nothing about, who commit these wicked acts. And the facts are, we need to be honest about these problems, especially with mass immigration. We can keep covering up the statistics. I noticed on the Home Office website, it will tell you knife crime victims by ethnicity, but it won't tell you knife crime perpetrators. And it's this sort of hiding things that just does no one any good. And we've just recently had all these figures produced, for example, that Albanians are like 20, 30, 40 times more likely to be arrested than native Britons.
Yeah.
And it's just an utter scandal. The governments have been lying to us and telling us it's no good chanting diversity is our strength, and then hiding things under a rock so that people can't see the truth. It's no good. We've got to be honest. We've got to face up to these real problems and stop accusing police officers who are trying to do a good job of racism. If police officers were racist, they would be picking all the time on elderly Asian ladies who wouldn't give them any grief.
Yeah.
But they don't pick on elderly Asian ladies because they don't do much crime at all. Why would you pick on young, fit men if you were a racist? You pick on somebody elderly who couldn't fight back. So it's a nonsense. Senior police officers and politicians need to step out and step forward and support these officers.
Absolutely. Mike, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Mike Neville, former Metropolitan Police Detective Chief Inspector. Let's get a voice note from Sean on the NHS.
Hi, Sean of Cheshire, currently in France. I would say recuperating, but you can hear I'm not. Stinking cold hit me as I arrived. I've been listening avidly to the NHS. Now, I'm a veteran. and I've got some, what the NHS call complex needs. It isn't really, it's just wear and tear from being in the military, but the way that the NHS break it down, they make it very, very complicated and very long-winded. Everything must be a completely separate consultant, even though you might have the same problem with two knees. You don't see the same consultant who looks at both knees at the same time. I can confirm 100% that what they do is that they do cancel on the day, and what they do is they send letters, second-class post, so that you get your appointment cancelled 3 days after you didn't know you had the appointment because you'd never received a letter for the appointment in the first place. That then puts you on the naughty boy or naughty girl list. They then put you back. They don't slot you in. They put you to the bottom of the pile, which in the case where I was having was 12 weeks minimum, but sitting normally at 6 months.
Yeah, I mean, this is a racket, isn't it? There's clearly something going on. Sean talking there about the NHS. He's over in France at the moment. But yeah, I mean, people have told me time and again they've had letters delivered to them saying they've got an appointment after the date the appointment was actually set for. You know, that can't be an accident. Or getting the cancelled letter saying your appointment's been cancelled like a day before or a day after you were supposed to have the appointment. It's all very strange, isn't it? This from Kenny in Edinburgh. He says, Mike, the custard my Auntie Katie makes, that's how thick Rachel from accounts is. How is housing going to grow the economy when most of those newly built houses will go to illegal migrants with the taxpayer paying the bloody rent? And I don't think it's that she's ignorant like Starmer and Rayner. I think she's just stupid. At least she's got real experience in the complaints department because she's going to have to deal with millions of them. Yeah, absolutely right. I couldn't agree more with that. This is, of course, Morning Glory. Julie Hartley-Brewer here in about 20 minutes' time. We'll take more of your calls. We'll take more of your voice notes, of course, as well. Harry Cole, by the way, from The Sun, is on Drive today. You don't want to miss that from 4 o'clock, 4 till 7 tonight. Julie Hartley-Brewer coming up next. And, of course, Ian Collins between 1 and 4. Kevin O'Sullivan after that. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 9:42. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. Just another less than 20 minutes to go, really. How about this, Mike? Says Nick from Milton Keynes. How come Rachel from accounts is not telling us about how much money will be paid to accommodate illegal invaders? Well, I mean, that's really a very interesting point because she didn't mention it yesterday, I don't think. She did have plenty of buzzwords, though. We've already heard her talking about fiscal room. We've already heard her talking about working people. Let's have a listen to now how many times she mentions stability.
First, our stability rule. Turning first to the stability rule. Restoring stability to our public finances. I have restored in full our headroom against the stability rule. To bring stability to our economy, that means we are continuing to meet the stability rule 2 years early. The right choices for stability. I will always deliver economic stability.
What about the Motability rule? How's that going? Oh, yeah, we've got plenty of cars. What kind of car do you fancy? How about BMW? Yeah, no problem at all. If you've got PIP, yeah, absolutely. Great. Well, we can upgrade you. We can update you. You want 4 exhausts or 2? You want the bucket seats? You want the leather steering wheel? Heated, of course. Yes, please. That would be really lovely. Because it's not really for me. It's for my son. He's not disabled at all, but he quite fancies driving around a free BMW. My thanks. Let's talk to Andy, who's in Rochdale, wants to talk about the NHS. Andy, very good morning.
Morning, Mike.
How are you doing, sir? What can I do for you?
Yes, I've got 2 incompetents. One on my nose, one under my eye.
Right.
And they're wanting to send... It's been going on this for 18 months, and I still haven't had it operated on.
Right.
They want to send me... I've been to Salford Oil 3 times. After kicking up a post, I said, can't the same surgeon do both cancers?
Yeah.
And they want to send me back to Fairfield in Bury. And then I got a phone call yesterday saying, can I go to Trafford?
A different place?
Trafford General.
Yeah.
And I still haven't got a date to have them done.
Right.
And that's getting on for 18 months.
That's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous.
That'll be 3 different hospitals.
Yeah. Listen, Andy, thanks for your call. The line's not great, so I'm going to let you go. Phil's in Hertfordshire, wants to talk about waiting lists as well. Phil.
Good morning, Mike. How are we doing,
Yeah,
sir?
good, sir. What can you tell me?
Yeah, good. Mike, I mean, in my opinion, I think there's an assault on the indigenous people of this country in certain areas. My daughter had 6 years on a waiting list for a house on a local authority.
Yeah.
They'd kicked her off because, and her reason was, she didn't reply to an email. Now, the email address was from a do not reply email address with no reference to the local authority in that email address.
Right, so she didn't know who it was from?
She didn't know who it was from.
Right.
And I said, well, if you clicked on it, you would have seen who it was from us. Now, when you look at these waiting lists as well, that people are being kicked off through, like NHS and housing, are they Indigenous people that are being kicked off these waiting lists?
Well, I mean, I don't know, but it certainly seems as though it's certainly. I don't think they're kicking people off the waiting list to put other people on it. I think they're kicking them off to make it look like the waiting list is going down.
Yeah, well, I think they're kicking people off to prioritise others.
Yeah, maybe. They could be. I mean, your guess is as good as mine. What I do know is that this government is not telling us the truth.
No, exactly. I mean, I do a lot of work for local authorities, Mike.
Yeah.
So I work in these houses,
right.
and I know what people are going in there.
Right. Of course you do. And I mean, would you say proportionally at the moment it's much more numbers of migrants rather than it is of what you might call people who are already living here?
100%.
Yeah. Astonishing. Good to talk to you, Phil. Thanks very much indeed. Steve from a peaceful West Country says you couldn't pay me enough money to go to London because of the stuff that goes on up there. So take a tip from the movie Escape from Los Angeles. Build a wall around it to keep the trouble inside. Bev from Hampshire says, morning, Mike. Thanks for the show as always. On knife crime, 2 armed men with a knife attacked our grandson. They were caught, remanded and found guilty. The police were excellent, caught them in less than 24 hours. They were subsequently released early from their sentence as part of the government's policy of releasing prisoners early. Brilliant. When I complained to our MP, he asked me if I wanted him to speak to the police about it. I told him no, it's this government's fault. No response. Yeah, I mean, it's all very well for the police to go and arrest people and to charge them and to get them banged up. But if the government's going to release them, you know, a couple of weeks later, what's the point? What is the point? And you can guarantee that those horrible people with the knives will be back stabbing somebody else any time now. Coming up to 9:47. Loads more coming up on Morning Glory.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
10 minutes to 10, Julie Hartley-Brewer coming in very shortly. The government have announced, of course, we did break this to you earlier, from the 1st of August, ninja swords will be banned, making it illegal to possess, manufacture, import or sell these deadly weapons. Presumably, they'll also make it illegal to stab people with them. But I don't know why they're waiting until the 1st of August. Absolutely ridiculous. Mike, I've worked for 45 years. I've never claimed any benefits. I should be a two-tier pension system for those who actually worked and paid into it. I think that's right. And John says, Mike, I was given a vascular appointment back in June of 2024. It was cancelled. Now I have to wait until December 25 for an appointment before any surgery. What an absolute joke. Well, that is ridiculous. Let's get a voice note from Steve on the NHS.
Hi, Mike. Steve from Elstree. Thanks for the programme. Concerning NHS, my partner has received over the last few weeks 2 letters confirming her appointment and 3 letters cancelling it. What should she do?
That's ridiculous. So she've cancelled it more times than they've actually made the appointment. Brilliant. This is the thing. I mean, what is going on inside the system? The system is clearly not functioning the way that it's meant to. But what I worry about is that they're using the dysfunctional system, perhaps deliberately, to make it look as though appointments are kind of being made more regularly now than they were, and that waiting lists are actually getting shorter. I don't think they are. I think they're just moving people from one waiting list to another. That sounds like what's going on to me. Simon in Durham says, hearing all these stories of people's appointment issues with the NHS, I wonder if going out on the street and banging some pots and pans in honour of the health service might help in some way to save it. Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, ridiculous. I never did that. I just want to make that very clear. And I don't understand really anybody who did. You know, I used to go back to see my kids at the weekend and say, why aren't you out here clapping for me? You know, I've been working all week. Surely you should be giving me a round of applause. Because that's what's happening everywhere else. People that work in the NHS are getting a round of applause for doing their jobs. Ridiculous. The clocks go back this weekend. But, oh, by the way, Russell Quirk's in for Ian Collins coming up at 1 o'clock. So I've been asked to point that out. Harry Cole in at the drive at 4 o'clock as well. Peter Hitchens was on earlier talking about the event this weekend of the clocks going forward, because that's what happens in the spring. He says it's a very bad idea. Have a listen.
Well, you were ridiculously saying it was a good thing. The days have been growing. Days have been growing longer for weeks, and they will continue to do so if left alone, for right up until June. And there's absolutely no need to do this. What happens when they falsify the clocks? And by the way, can you think of if you falsify the weights, if you're a market trader, then you're open to prosecution. But we're actually ordered by the government to falsify our clocks to get them to read at the time.
I mean, I don't remember.
Time is real. I can't think of any other circumstance. If you falsified your speedometer on your car, if you falsified all the thermometers in hospitals or indeed on central heating systems, it's crazy. And what most people don't know, if you ask them, do the clocks go forward or backwards on Sunday night, they don't know. They have to look it up. And because they don't understand it. The whole thing is a national intelligence test, which 99.9% of the population fail. What is happening is the government is ordering everybody to get up early and go to work an hour early for the next, 8 months or so.
Yeah. Well, what if they're working from home? It's working from home doesn't matter, does it?
Benefit whatsoever. And also, in quite a number of cases, it's bad for the health, particularly people with heart troubles. It's now recognised, and there is research which shows that quite a large number of people are seriously ill as a result of this clock, or I'd say as a result of following this clock change each year. It does absolutely no good. Why don't we just stop doing it?
Listen, I don't know where you got. I don't know where you got the idea that I was natural time. I don't know where you got the idea that I was a massive, advocate.
Well, you were saying it was a good time.
I'm sort of agnostic. I'm sort of agnostic about it. I don't mind really. I don't really mind it, but anyway, listen. Don't forget, it's spring forward.
You'll mind it on Monday morning because you'll have to get up an hour earlier.
No, I won't. I'll just go to bed an hour earlier.
You'll mind it. Sunday, everybody thinks, oh, okay, but on Monday morning, you have to start work an hour earlier. The schools start an hour earlier. The shops close an hour earlier in the evening. Every workplace, as I say, is affected. All the timetables broadcasting are affected.
Yeah.
You can't ignore it or live or
no.
live.
Do you change your clocks at home, or do you leave them on sort of winter time?
If I was living in retirement, I'd ignore the whole thing. But I'm still at work. I have to catch trains and go to work and deliver copy on time and stuff like that. I have to observe it. But I think it's completely stupid. As it's a national intelligence test. If people would only think about it, they demand that it stop. But everybody just submits to it. It's extraordinary.
Peter Hitchens there with his annual rant about the clocks going forward. And we do it as well, of course, in the autumn when the clocks go back. You know, it was funny when I used to do the overnight show on talkSPORT. I used to always look forward to spring because I would do a show that went from 1 a.m. till 6 a.m. in the morning. And once I was doing it in spring, you'd start at 1 o'clock, and when you got to 2 o'clock, suddenly it was 3 o'clock. So you only had to do a 4-hour show. Of course, the converse was true when I used to do the show in the autumn, because I'd start the show at 1 o'clock, and we'd get to 2 o'clock, and we'd go back to 1 o'clock. And I'd go, well, hang on, can't we just replay the first hour? And the producer was like, no, you've got to do another one. And so I had to start the show again. It was kind of ridiculous. But there we are. Let's get a voice note from Ben in Prague.
Left many messages before. Not sure you've ever played any of them. So let's. I'll keep on trying. I'm sure I'll get there one day. But yeah, it's very sad to see. I mean, I haven't lived there for 12 years now. Best decision I ever made, and made it at the right time. The contrast of the way things operate here to Britain is stark. You just see vehicles everywhere on the streets, people collecting rubbish, recycling being done and made easy, emergency services all running perfectly fine. The transport service is still cheap. It's barely gone up in price in 12 years and it runs as efficient as clockwork. When I first moved to Prague, I thought I was moving to a country that might be, so we say, slightly behind in many aspects. It couldn't be further from the truth.
Taz, thank you very much. Ben, sorry, from Prague, thank you very much indeed. Anybody wants to send voice notes in, if you're not getting through, if they're not getting played out, it's probably because they might be a bit long. If you keep them under 30 seconds, there's a pretty good chance they'll get played. So thank you very much for all that. We had a couple of notes from people saying, I keep sending you voice notes, you don't play them. Well, it's partly because they might be a bit long. They might go on a bit. I mean, we're allowed to go on a bit because it's what we get paid to do. But you can't. Yeah, you have to keep it short. Julie Hartley Brewers.
3 hours, mate.
I know.
You do 4.
I do 4. Taz, I'm sorry I didn't get to you, mate, but sorry, I went on a bit. Anyway, how are you?
I'm good. I'm going to go on a bit. We're going to talk about the
feeling better or worse after the Reeves machine?
They're utterly delusional.
They are.
I mean, all of the forecasts are wrong. We know that because all forecasts are wrong.
Yes.
This sort of fiscal headroom, which is rainy day money for when things go wrong, is the equivalent of like, oh, there's a tornado that might hit. I've got 25 quid in my back pocket, spare change, just in case. They're just utterly detached from the real world, how ordinary people, older people, all of us live our lives, how businesses make decisions, whether that's to employ someone, how people are balancing their budgets.
Because they haven't had to pay for anything for themselves for such a long time.
They've pretty much all been in the public sector. I think that is a really big issue. I mean, anyone who thinks you're going to deliver growth by taxing employers more on the jobs that they create, I mean, you're clearly mad.
Yes.
You're clearly, you've just your brain's been damaged by the loud noise that Sabrina Carpenter.
I actually said this morning, she's at the point now where I'm starting to wonder whether she is actually, if she's got some kind of issue, some kind of problem, that she's that delusional, that she's still smiling as she goes into work.
The whole Treasury. Well, it's interesting. She's even getting criticised by the Mirror today.
I know.
If
The Guardian.
If you've lost the Mirror 10 months into a Labour government, oops, things are going pretty badly. But again, the people criticising her, they don't think you should cut a single penny off benefits.
No, of course not.
So they're part of the problem.
And I know that people will say, but we criticised Zelensky for not wearing a suit. Why was she wearing a onesie to go and do it? I mean, she could have dressed up a bit, couldn't she?
I do have this thing about, I do have an issue